Chapter 713. What had happened today had indeed shocked the Tang family. For Dao Gate realm guards had gone to capture Xiaochen, but one of them had been killed by Xiaochen in the end. The other three could be said to have fled in panic. In less than 2 months, Xiaochen's cultivation had broken through from the Dao validation realm to the Dao querying realm. Such an improvement had indeed exceeded everyone's expectations. Hearing Tang Tiancheng's words, Tang Meng also looked at him. As the son he was most proud of, Tang Meng had high hopes for Tang Tiancheng. Tang Tiancheng had indeed not disappointed him. At least, Tang Tiancheng had lived up to his reputation as the true dragon of the Tang family. Facing Tang Meng's gaze, Tang Tiancheng appeared to be extremely shocked, even a little indifferent, compared to the ugly expressions of the others present. It was as if Tang Tiancheng did not care about Xiaochen's breakthrough at all. His eyes were filled with confidence. Compared to Tang Tiancheng's confidence, Tang Meng was filled with worry. He said with a grave expression, "Tiancheng, Xiaochen, that little bastard, has already broken through to the Dao Gate realm. Will it be dangerous for you to take action personally? Why don't I send someone to kill him directly? Isn't he in the Dao Gate realm? I don't believe that he can defeat an elder of the Tang family if I send a few elders to take action." He was a little worried that Tang Tiancheng would not be a match for Xiaochen. After all, Tang Tiancheng's cultivation was only at the initial Dao Gate realm. Although Tang Tiancheng's combat strength was very strong and he had condensed the pentagons, Xiaochen was clearly not an ordinary person. Therefore, Tang Meng did not want Tang Tiancheng to take the risk personally. However, facing Tang Meng's worries, Tang Tiancheng did not mind at all and smiled faintly. "Father, you don't have to worry. Killing Xiaochen is just a piece of cake for me. Moreover, if you send someone else to kill Xiaochen, it will be difficult to explain to Tianfeng's. It's better for me to do it personally." Tang Tiancheng had absolute confidence in killing Xiaochen. Moreover, Xiaochen was a direct disciple of Tianfeng's. If he died while others were injured, Tianfeng's would pursue the matter. If Tang Tiancheng took action, Tianfeng's would have nothing to say. Would Tianfeng's dare to go to the ancient saint sect to take action? The most suitable person to kill Xiaochen was undoubtedly Tang Tiancheng. Hearing his son's words, Tang Meng fell into silence. Tang Tiancheng's words were not without reason. However, after experiencing today's events, Tang Meng was a little worried. What if Tang Tiancheng was not Xiaochen's match? After pondering for a while, Tang Meng finally looked at Tang Tiancheng and asked solemnly, "Tiancheng, are you really confident in killing Xiaochen?" Tang Meng naturally did not want Tang Tiancheng to take any more risks since one of his sons had already died. Facing Tang Meng's question, Tang Tiancheng smiled and replied without thinking, "Father, don't worry. I will definitely kill Xiaochen and avenge my younger brother." Tang Tiancheng's words were full of confidence. Although Xiaochen had broken through to the Dao Gate realm in just over a month, Tang Tiancheng felt that Xiaochen must have obtained some kind of opportunity in the Wind Plains. But even so, what could Xiaochen do after breaking through to the Dao Gate realm? One had to know that Tang Tiancheng was not an ordinary Dao Gate realm warrior. As a direct disciple of the ancient saint sect, Tang Tiancheng's strength was obviously not something an ordinary warrior could compare with. Both of them were in the Dao Gate realm, and Tang Tiancheng was in the initial stage of the Dao Gate realm. His cultivation was one stage higher than Xiaochen's. Moreover, Xiaochen was only a direct disciple of Tianfeng's, while Tang Tiancheng was a direct disciple of the ancient saint sect. There was no reason for Tang Tiancheng to lose to Xiaochen. Tang Meng was full of confidence. Seeing this, Tang Meng finally nodded and said, "All right, but Tiancheng, you must not be careless when dealing with Xiaochen." Tang Meng reminded Tang Tiancheng after promising him. Hearing this, Tang Tiancheng nodded indifferently. Then, he walked out of the hall and sneered in his heart. "Xiaochen, I'll personally take your life tomorrow. I'll let you know that my Tang family is not to be trifled with." Tang Tiancheng wanted to deal with Xiaochen personally. At the same time, the battle between Xiaochen and the Tang family's guards was quickly spread throughout the wind-suppressing city. Some people even found out that the reason why the Tang family wanted to deal with Xiaochen was because Xiaochen had killed Tang Tianbao in the Wind Plains. For a moment, all the major families in the wind-suppressing city were secretly paying attention to the development of the situation. After all, the Tang family was one of the 3 major families in the wind-suppressing city. Every action of the Tang family had a great impact on the wind-suppressing city. The other 2 family heads in the city lord's mansion knew about the feud between the Tang family and Xiaochen. At this moment, in the city lord's mansion, Saint Kuangli was sitting in the study room. He smiled faintly as he looked at the deacon of the ancient saint sect in front of him. Xiaochen has broken through to the Dao Gate realm? It seems like he has gained a lot from this trip to the Wind Plains. Yeah, but this matter between Xiaochen and the Tang family is still a little troublesome. The Tang family will not let this matter rest. Do we need to step in? After knowing that Xiaochen had killed Tang Tianbao, the Tang family would definitely not let this matter rest. Moreover, Tang Tiancheng happened to be in the Tang family, which undoubtedly gave the Tang family a reason not to fear Xiaochen. The deacon of the ancient saint sect asked if the city lord's mansion should step in to mediate the situation. After all, he knew that Saint Kuangli had high hopes for Xiaochen. However, Saint Kuangli smiled. Tang Tiancheng should be the one to take action tomorrow. After all, other than him, no one else in the Tang family can touch Xiaochen. Let's wait and see how strong Xiaochen is after breaking through to the Dao Gate realm. Saint Kuangli had already guessed that the Tang family would send Tang Tiancheng out tomorrow. He was curious about whether Xiaochen would be a match for Tang Tiancheng. Anyway, with the city lord's mansion around, nothing would happen to Xiaochen. He was still unaware that the matter between him and the Tang family had already caused an uproar in the city. After a good night's sleep, Xiaochen prepared to return to Tianfeng Xingzong the next day. After leaving the inn, Xiaochen did not try to hide his whereabouts. He swaggered towards the teleportation array in Wind Suppression City. The Tang family naturally paid close attention to Xiaochen's whereabouts. Therefore, as soon as Xiaochen left the inn, the Tang family received the news. At the same time, Tang Tiancheng also rushed towards the teleportation array in Wind Suppression City. Xiaochen and Tang Tiancheng unexpectedly met outside the teleportation array in Wind Suppression City. Tang Tiancheng brought several elders of the Tang family. These elders were all at the Dao King realm, and one of them had even reached the Dao Emperor realm. Tang Tiancheng blocked Xiaochen's path and said indifferently, "Xiaochen, do you think that the Tang family won't dare to do anything to you? How dare you act so brazenly after killing a member of my Tang family? Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation." End of chapter. Chapter 7:14. Tang Tiancheng was wearing the uniform of a direct disciple of the ancient saint sect. Seeing this, a smile appeared on Xiaochen's face. He already understood where the Tang family's confidence came from. Logically speaking, there was only one explanation for the Tang family daring to make a move on him despite knowing that he was a direct disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. That was that the Tang family had the confidence to not fear Tianjin Xingzong. Previously, Xiaochen had been curious as to where a mere half-step saint family got the confidence to not fear the Heavenly Wind Holy Sect. However, after seeing Tang Tiancheng today, Xiaochen understood. Tang Tiancheng was a direct disciple of the ancient sacred sect. This was the reason why Tang family dared to attack him. However, the Tang family clearly didn't suspect that Xiaochen didn't choose to leave Jinfeng City even though he knew that the Tang family was no longer afraid of his identity. This also meant that Xiaochen also had his own backing. This backing had nothing to do with Tianjin Xingzong, because it came from the octagonal gate. Tang Tiancheng was a direct disciple of the ancient saint sect. The ancient saint sect stood behind him. However, if Xiaochen exposed the fact that he possessed the octagonal gate, what would the ancient saint sect do? The ancient saint sect had already begun to secretly pay attention to Xiaochen. Now, not only had Xiaochen broken through to the Dao Gate realm, but he had also condensed the octagonal gate. In this way, would the ancient saint sect allow something to happen to Xiaochen? If nothing unexpected happened, once Xiaochen's octagonal gate was exposed, the upper echelons of the ancient saint sect would definitely not sit idly by. The octagonal Tao Gate, or rather, his own talent, was Xiao Chen's greatest reliance. Between a person who had formed the octagonal Tao Gate and a personal disciple, it shouldn't be a difficult choice to make. Tang Tiancheng obviously didn't know what Xiao Chen was thinking. Of course, Tang Tiancheng had also completely underestimated the importance that the ancient saint sect attached to Xiao Chen. In Tang Tiancheng's opinion, even if Xiao Chen had some talent, it was nothing compared to him. The ancient saint sect wouldn't blame him, a pro-disciple of the ancient saint sect, for a pro-disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. He felt that Xiao Chen was relying on Tianfeng Xingzong. Therefore, Tang Tiancheng came in person today to tell Xiao Chen that Tianfeng Xingzong was nothing. At least, they couldn't protect Xiao Chen. Facing Tang Tiancheng's confident expression, Xiao Chen revealed a faint smile and said, "So this is what your Tang family is relying on as a pro-disciple of the ancient saint sect. What? Do you still think that my Tang family doesn't dare to kill you?" Tang Tiancheng didn't deny Xiao Chen's words. Instead, he sneered and replied. With Tang Tiancheng's status, he naturally dared to kill Xiao Chen. Hearing his words, Xiao Chen didn't panic as expected. Instead, he smiled and said without any change in his expression, "Do you think you can kill me?" Since he had nothing to fear, Xiao Chen naturally didn't have anything to worry about. Moreover, it was rare to meet Tang Tiancheng, a pro-disciple of the ancient saint sect. Xiao Chen's cultivation had also broken through to the Tao Gate realm. To be honest, Xiao Chen also wanted to see how strong he was now, especially when compared to the pro-disciples of the ancient saint sect. It should be known that Xiao Chen's next goal was to become the prospective Holy Son. In this way, his strength would naturally surpass that of the pro-disciples of the ancient saint sect. Therefore, it was no exaggeration to say that Tang Tiancheng was Xiao Chen's alchemy stone. Moreover, he was the most suitable alchemy stone. After he finished speaking, a battle intent slowly spread out from Xiao Chen's body. Feeling this battle intent, Tang Tiancheng was stunned at first, but he quickly sneered and said, "What? You think you have the strength to contend with me after breaking through to the Tao Gate realm by luck? I'm not comparable to a pro-disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong." As he spoke, a wave of spiritual energy suddenly surged out from Tang Tiancheng's body. This wave of spiritual energy was extremely pure and huge. Tang Tiancheng could only be considered as the weakest among the pro-disciples of the ancient saint sect. However, if he was placed in Tianfeng Xingzong, with his strength and talent, he could at least be ranked in the top 3. After all, even the number 1 pro-disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong, Wang Zong, would only be able to condense the Pentagate if he broke through to the Tao Gate realm, just like Tang Tiancheng. In the Heavenly Wind Sacred Sect, the pentagonal Tao Gate was already a peak existence. However, in the ancient sacred sect, the pentagonal Tao Gate was merely at the threshold of a direct disciple. Only direct disciples who could form the 6-edged Tao Gate could be considered the true peak. Of course, if one wanted to reach the level of a Holy Son or a prospective Holy Son, the Pentagate should be the standard. A terrifying aura constantly spread out from Tang Tiancheng's body. Sensing Tang Tiancheng's terrifying spiritual energy, Xiao Chen wasn't nervous at all. On the contrary, the battle intent in his heart grew even stronger. The two of them stood facing each other. A great battle was about to break out. The surrounding cultivators all looked curiously at Xiao Chen and Tang Tiancheng. As geniuses of the younger generation in the ancient saint state, the battle between Xiao Chen and Tang Tiancheng was naturally very attractive. After a while, Tang Tiancheng made the first move. All along, Xiao Chen's indifferent attitude had made Tang Tiancheng furious. The storage ring on his hand flashed and a long sword appeared in his hand. He fiercely stabbed out as he shouted coldly, "Xiao Chen, die! Today, I'll use your head to test my younger brother, Tian Bao. Come and take it if you have the ability. Let me see how strong a pro-disciple of the ancient saint sect is." Hearing Tang Tiancheng's words, Xiao Chen calmly replied. Then, he unsheathed his ink dragon sword and stabbed out to meet Tang Tiancheng's attack. Both of them were sword cultivators. When their swords were unsheathed, sword intent swept out. With a clang, the two long swords collided. The terrifying sword intent instantly tore the ground apart. It was a head-on collision. Surprisingly, Xiaochen didn't fall into a disadvantageous position when facing Tang Tiancheng. Originally, people thought that Tang Tiancheng's strength should be able to suppress Xiaochen. However, after the real battle, Xiaochen didn't choose to dodge Tang Tiancheng's attack. Instead, he chose to meet it head-on in the most direct way. In a head-on collision, Xiaochen blocked Tang Tiancheng's attack. Moreover, he didn't fall into a disadvantageous position at all. This shocked the surrounding people. One must know that Xiaochen was only a prodisciple of Tianfeng Xingzong, while Tang Tiancheng was a prodisciple of the ancient Saint sect. Although they were both prodisciples, logically speaking, there should be an insurmountable gap between the two of them. After all, in terms of quality, a prodisciple of the ancient Saint sect was definitely stronger than a prodisciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. With just one attack, Xiaochen gave everyone a pleasant surprise. Of course, the one who was most shocked was Tang Tiancheng. Facing Xiaochen personally, Tang Tiancheng could clearly feel that the power of Xiaochen's sword wasn't any weaker than his own. This made Tang Tiancheng feel a mix of emotions. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 7:15. Tang Tiancheng didn't hold back at all because he had attacked in anger. However, Xiaochen didn't seem to be at a disadvantage when facing his full-powered attack. This shocked Tang Tiancheng for a moment. Compared to Tang Tiancheng's shock, Xiaochen didn't think so much. After facing Tang Tiancheng head-on, Xiaochen felt that Tang Tiancheng was too weak. Although Tang Tiancheng's cultivation was at the initial success stage of the Dao Gate realm, Xiaochen didn't feel too much pressure from Tang Tiancheng's attack. Moreover, Xiaochen's attack just now was just a casual attack. He didn't use his tempered battle body, nor did he fully activate his 8-edged Dao Gate. However, even so, Xiaochen was still able to withstand Tang Tiancheng's attack without too much pressure. Originally, Xiaochen had some expectations for Tang Tiancheng. After all, Tang Tiancheng was a direct disciple of the ancient sacred sect. He thought that Tang Tiancheng should be able to give him a good fight. However, the reality was that Tang Tiancheng's strength disappointed Xiaochen. With a faint disappointment in his heart, Xiaochen said faintly, "If your strength is only like this, then it's too boring." Xiaochen didn't hide the disappointment in his heart. His meaning was very clear. If Tang Tiancheng hadn't hidden his strength before, then Xiaochen had already lost interest in fighting with Tang Tiancheng. Facing Xiaochen's naked disappointment, Tang Tiancheng only felt that he had been greatly insulted. What did this mean? Did Xiaochen think that he was too weak? As a direct disciple of the ancient sacred sect, Xiaochen actually said that fighting with him was too boring. The anger in his heart suddenly rose like a volcanic eruption. Tang Tiancheng stared at Xiaochen as if his eyes were about to spit fire. Tang Tiancheng gritted his teeth and said, "Xiaochen, I want you to die." With this angry shout, Tang Tiancheng directly used his killing move. A dark green flame burned on the blade of his sword. In an instant, the long sword in Tang Tiancheng's hand turned into a flaming sword. Demonic flame annihilation. With an angry roar, Tang Tiancheng slashed his sword at Xiaochen. The terrifying dark green flame was like a fire dragon, fiercely attacking Xiaochen. It was a heaven-class upper-grade martial skill. Tang Tiancheng's demonic scorching kill was a heaven-class upper-grade martial skill. It could be said that this sword was Tang Tiancheng's killing move. Obviously, Xiaochen's words had angered Tang Tiancheng, so he directly used his killing move. The flames that seemed to be able to incinerate everything rapidly rushed towards Xiaochen. Everyone's expressions changed drastically at the sight of this. Although they were not directly facing Tang Tiancheng, the might of Tang Tiancheng's demonic flame annihilation was enough to make their scalps numb. Some of the Dao Transformation Realm and Dao King Realm martial artists couldn't help but exclaim, "I'm afraid no one in the Dao Gate realm can block this sword." Other than the geniuses at the same level as Tang Tiancheng, no one in the Dao Gate realm could block this demonic flame annihilation. It was a very high evaluation. However, along with these people's exclamations, some people also realized that Xiaochen had no intention of dodging Tang Tianqing's attack. Seeing that the demonic flame annihilation was getting closer and closer, Xiaochen still stood on the same spot without any change in his expression. Is he not going to dodge? Could it be that Xiaochen still wants to take Tang Tianqing's demonic flame annihilation head-on? Noticing Xiaochen's actions, someone exclaimed in disbelief. Along with this person's words, everyone also looked at Xiaochen. Some people were shocked, while others mocked at the same time. I think Xiaochen is scared out of his wits. Someone mocked after being scared out of his wits by Tang Tianqing's demonic flame annihilation. However, no matter what the crowd said, Xiaochen still had no intention of dodging. Noticing Xiaochen's indifference, the anger in Tang Tianqing's eyes intensified. At the same time, a ferocious look flickered in his eyes as he shouted angrily, "Xiaochen, die!" In Tang Tianqing's eyes, regardless of the reason why Xiaochen didn't choose to dodge, the result was the same. Tang Tianqing wanted to kill Xiaochen with a single sword strike. Under Tang Tianqing's furious roar, the demonic flame annihilation instantly engulfed Xiaochen. The terrifying flame soared into the sky. The dark green flame seemed to have turned the surroundings into hell. The demonic flame that came from hell was burning everything in front of it. Such a terrifying power was enough to destroy everything in the surroundings. However, just as Tang Tianqing's flame completely erupted, an invisible power of law descended from the sky and completely isolated the space where the two of them were fighting. It was also because of the appearance of this power of law that the surrounding people and buildings weren't affected. The dark green demonic flame burned everything, and Xiaochen's voice was also completely shrouded by the demonic flame. He couldn't see Xiaochen's current situation at all, let alone know whether he was dead or alive. After being hit by the demonic flame annihilation head-on, many of the surrounding people shook their heads and sighed. Alas, what a pity. He actually took Tang Tianqing's demonic flame annihilation head-on. Even if he doesn't die, he will definitely be seriously injured. Yeah, I really don't know what Xiaochen is thinking. Is he really scared out of his wits? Xiaochen completely ignored Tang Tianqing's demonic flame annihilation head-on. In the eyes of the crowd, this was definitely the most unwise choice. Of course, no one knew that the reason why Xiaochen didn't dodge was because Xiaochen didn't feel any danger from Tang Tianqing's demonic flame annihilation. Since Tang Tianqing's killing move wasn't dangerous to him, why should Xiaochen dodge it? No one saw that Xiaochen's body was shrouded in a golden light under the dark green flames. This was the tempered battle body. His entire body wasn't hurt by the demonic flame annihilation at all. Not to mention his hands, even the corners of his clothes weren't burned at all. It could be said that he wasn't hurt at all, standing in the flames of the demonic flame annihilation. Xiaochen said disappointedly. Is this the ancient Saint Sect's pro-disciple? He's really weak. Xiaochen sighed at Tang Tianqing's weakness from the bottom of his heart. He originally thought that Tang Tianqing, who was a pro-disciple of the ancient Saint Sect, would at least be able to make him fight with all his might. But now, it seemed that Tang Tianqing didn't just let him down. He had completely overestimated him. In the face of Xiaochen's sigh, Xiaoxing's unfriendly voice sounded. You brat, do you think the 8-edged Dao Gate is an ordinary thing? Tang Tianqing's Dao Gate should be at the 5-edge level, while yours is at the 8-edge level. The difference in cultivation between the two of you isn't that big. Your 8-edged Dao Gate is more than enough to crush him. Moreover, don't forget that you refine the heavenly spiritual pool to break through to the Dao Gate realm. You can completely crush this brat in any aspect. How can he threaten you this time? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 7:16. You little brat, do you really think that the octagonal Dao Gate is a piece of trash? Since it's the highest level of Dao Gate, it naturally has its heaven-defying aspects. If it has to spend so much effort to deal with a mere pentagonal Dao Gate, then the octagonal Dao Gate would be too trashy, Xiaoxing said snappily in the face of Xiaochen's lament. Ever since he had fought with Tang Tianqing, Xiaochen had always felt that Tang Tianqing had disappointed him too much. However, Xiaochen didn't know that it wasn't that Tang Tiancheng was too weak, but that Xiaochen was too strong. Firstly, the difference in cultivation between the two of them wasn't that great. Tang Tiancheng was in the Dao Gate realm, so Xiaochen's cultivation was only a small realm higher than Xiaochen's. On the other hand, Xiaochen possessed the octagonal Dao Gate, the tempered battle body, and the 20% of the heaven's spiritual pool that he had refined. It could be said that Xiaochen's strength had improved tremendously compared to a month ago. As for how terrifying this improvement was, Xiaochen knew that he still hadn't adapted to the improvement in his strength over the past month. Deep in his heart, Xiaochen still felt that a personal disciple like Tang Tiancheng was an opponent worthy of being treated seriously. However, he didn't know that after this great opportunity, personal disciples were no longer worthy of being treated as opponents by Xiaochen. Now, Xiaochen truly had the qualifications to covet the lofty position of chosen saint. Right now, Xiaochen was like a person who had been poor all his life and suddenly received a huge amount of wealth. However, deep in his heart, he still couldn't adapt and honestly felt that he was still a poor person. Of course, this wasn't Xiaochen's fault. This was because Xiaochen's improvement this time was too great, and the time was too short. It had only been a little over a month, so it was understandable that he hadn't adapted to the increase in his strength yet. After hearing Xiaoxing's scolding, Xiaochen also laughed self-deprecatingly. Yeah, why should I limit my sights to personal disciples? I've already decided to strive for the position of chosen saint. Tang Tiancheng wasn't wrong. What was wrong was that Xiaochen had too high of an expectation for him. What was wrong was that Xiaochen had placed too much importance on Tang Tiancheng. Now, Xiaochen didn't need to set his sights on personal disciples. Instead, he needed to look at a higher level, those chosen saints and prospective chosen saints. Hearing Xiaochen's words, Xiaoxing smiled and said, "That's more like it. With your current strength, if you still want to bicker with the personal disciples, wouldn't you be bullying the weak if word got out? Go to the ancient sacred sect. For the time being, you are not qualified to be the son of saint, but you already have the strength to compete with the prospective son of saint. Get the position of the prospective son of saint first. As for the personal disciples, they are in front of you and you don't need to worry too much." In the depths of the raging fire, Xiaochen and Xiaoxing chatted casually as if they were having a casual conversation. After they finished speaking, Xiaochen locked his eyes on the raging fire that enveloped him. Just as Xiaochen completely lost interest in entangling with Tang Tiancheng, more than 100 breaths had passed in the outside world. However, Xiaochen, who was enveloped by the demonic flames, still didn't move. Just when everyone thought that Xiaochen had been burned to death, there was suddenly a movement in the demonic flames. "Humph, you're really lucky to be killed by my demonic flames," Tang Tiancheng said faintly as he looked at the dark green flames in front of him. Just as he finished speaking, the demonic flames suddenly went berserk, as though they were being forcefully extinguished by some force. The demonic flames, which were originally monstrous, actually began to slowly dissipate at this moment. Furthermore, from the center of the demonic flames, the flames actually opened up a path. Looking along these separated demonic flames, one could clearly see that Xiaochen, who was originally engulfed by the demonic flames, actually walked out slowly at this moment, unharmed. After being trapped in the demonic flames for more than 100 breaths, Xiaochen's clothes didn't even have a trace of being burned, let alone being injured. Xiaochen walked out of the demonic flames unscathed. As soon as Xiaochen walked out of the encirclement of the demonic flames, the monstrous demonic flames quickly dissipated. They had been forcibly suppressed by Xiaochen's terrifying spiritual power. Xiaochen appeared in front of everyone again, but this time, the expressions on everyone's faces could be said to be extremely interesting when they saw him, especially Tang Tiancheng. At this moment, he was already muttering to himself as if he had seen a ghost. "How is this possible? How can you be fine? How can my demonic flames annihilation be useless?" Tang Tiancheng couldn't believe the scene in front of him. In response, Xiaochen said indifferently, "Nothing is impossible. I can only say that you're too weak. Alright, I'm no longer interested in playing with you. Now, do you want to scram by yourself, or do you want me to do it?" Xiaochen's tone was extremely indifferent. Hearing this, Tang Tianqing was stunned for a moment, then a sense of shame and indignation arose in his heart. He was completely humiliated by Xiaochen. Driven by this sense of shame and indignation, Tang Tianqing recklessly attacked Xiaochen. "Xiaochen, I'll kill you." As if he had lost his mind, Tang Tianqing only felt that he had been repeatedly humiliated by Xiaochen today. How could the proud Tang Tianqing endure this? He didn't care about anything else, he just wanted to kill Xiaochen with his own hands. Looking at Tang Tianqing rushing towards him, Xiaochen slowly pointed his finger with an indifferent expression. He directly displayed the Chunjun sword finger. A golden sword ray flashed and instantly hit Tang Tianqing's right hand that was holding the sword. He felt a burst of pain and the sword in his hand fell to the ground. Xiaochen knocked away Tang Tianqing's sword with one finger. At the same time, he took a step forward and appeared in front of Tang Tianqing in an instant. He grabbed Tang Tianqing's neck and lifted him up. Tang Tianqing was lifted up like a chick in Xiaochen's hand. No matter how hard Tang Tianqing struggled, he couldn't break free from Xiaochen's grasp. Looking at this scene, everyone present was dumbfounded. What's going on? What happened to the fierce battle? What happened to the battle between the personal disciples? How did Tang Tianqing get subdued by Xiaochen in the blink of an eye? From the moment Xiaochen appeared to subdue Tang Tianqing, he only used 2 moves. Facing Xiaochen, Tang Tianqing simply couldn't retaliate at all. Everyone was shocked. But apart from them, there was another person who was also filled with shock. And that person was Saint Kuangli, who had been hiding in the dark. Saint Kuangli had been secretly watching the development of the situation. At this moment, he hid in the void and looked at Xiaochen below with eyes full of astonishment. Tang Tianqing was a personal disciple of the ancient sage sect, but in the hands of Xiaochen, he was pressed to the ground like an ant and repeatedly rubbed against him. This simply shocked Saint Kuangli to the core. After recovering from the shock, Saint Kuangli seemed to have thought of something all of a sudden. A glint flashed in his eyes and he muttered to himself. Tang Tianqing condensed the Pentagate and Xiaochen can crush Tang Tianqing. In that case, the Dao Gate condensed by Xiaochen, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 717. From the beginning to the end, Saint Kuangli had been paying attention to the battle between Xiaochen and Tang Tianqing. After all, whether it was Xiaochen or Tang Tianqing, Saint Kuangli obviously didn't want anything to happen to them. Needless to say, Tang Tianqing was a direct disciple of the ancient saint sect, so Saint Kuangli naturally had to protect him. As for Xiaochen, he naturally couldn't leave him alone because he had already caught the attention of the higher-ups of the ancient saint sect. In addition, the cause of the whole incident was Xiaochen killing Tang Tianbao. To put it bluntly, in Saint Kuangli's opinion, no matter how strong Xiaochen was, killing Tang Tianbao was nothing at all. Originally, Saint Kuangli was about to appear and mediate between the two when the battle was about to end. However, the result of the battle was far beyond his expectations. He already knew that Xiaochen had broken through to the Dao Gate realm. Regarding this, Saint Kuangli was indeed a little surprised. Even so, from the beginning to the end, Saint Kuangli felt that even if Xiaochen could defeat Tang Tianqing, it wouldn't be too easy. Firstly, Xiaochen had just broken through to the Dao Gate realm. Secondly, Tang Tianqing was a direct disciple of the ancient saint sect. His battle strength wouldn't be too bad. That's right, unlike others, Saint Kuangli was optimistic about Xiaochen from the beginning. However, in his opinion, even if Xiaochen won, it would be very difficult. He had always held this thought, but who would have thought that Xiaochen would be so relaxed when facing Tang Tianqing? From the beginning to the end, Xiaochen seemed to be playing around, suppressing Tang Tianqing so easily that he couldn't turn the situation around. Looking at the scene in front of him, Saint Kuangli also had a bold guess in his heart. The strength of a Dao Gate realm cultivator, regardless of cultivation, was the most important factor. Tang Tianqing, on the other hand, had conjured a pentagonal gate of the way. Xiaochen was able to suppress Tang Tianqing so easily despite being one level lower than Tang Tianqing. What level would Xiaochen's gate of the way be? At the very least, one had to be at the level of the six-edged Tao Gate to be able to suppress Tang Tianqing so easily. As he thought like this in his heart, St. Kuangli sighed in his heart. However, at the same time, when they saw Tang Tianqing being captured with ease by Xiaochen, the expressions of the four elders of the Tang clan who'd come with him immediately changed, and the Tao Emperor Realm Elder in the lead even shouted furiously. Xiaochen, if you dare to hurt young Master Tianqing, the Tang family will tear you into pieces. Tang Tianbao had already been killed by Xiaochen. If anything happened to Tang Tianqing, Tang Meng would probably go crazy. That was why the four elders were so nervous. However, Xiaochen did not care about the threats of the four Tang family elders. He glanced at Tang Tianqing, who was in his hands like a dead dog. Xiaochen said indifferently, "Dismember him into 1,000 pieces? Your Tang clan can give it a try, but I guarantee that this piece of trash will definitely be a step ahead of me before I die." Tang Tianqing's life was in his hands now, so Xiaochen really didn't believe that the Tang clan would dare to fight to the death. Moreover, Xiaochen firmly believed that St. Kuangli would definitely not sit by idly. With so many layers of insurance, Xiaochen didn't care at all even if he was facing four elders of the Tang clan. The four elders of the Tang clan were livid when they heard Xiaochen, but they didn't dare move at all. What a joke! So long as Xiaochen exerted a little force, Tang Tianqing's neck would be broken. They were Tao kings and Tao emperors, but they didn't dare guarantee that they would be able to save Tang Tianqing in such a short period of time. The battle ended as quickly as it started. Moreover, to everyone's surprise, what was supposed to be a shocking battle had completely turned into a one-sided crushing. That's right, it was a one-sided crushing. Xiaochen had completely crushed Tang Tianqing. No one attacked again. Xiaochen and the four elders of the Tang clan faced each other with swords drawn. It was also at this moment that St. Kuangli's figure slowly appeared in the sky. He looked at the four elders of the Tang clan and snorted coldly. "Humph, does your Tang clan really not put me in your eyes? You actually dared to start a battle and win Suppression City." As soon as St. Kuangli appeared, the first thing he said was to berate the Tang clan. Even though the four elders of the Tang clan were displeased, they naturally didn't dare to show it. They all bowed respectfully and admitted their mistakes. St. Kuangli ignored the four elders of the Tang clan and landed directly in front of Xiaochen. His words just now were just to express his attitude. He didn't appear for the Tang clan, but for Xiaochen. Arriving in front of Xiaochen, St. Kuangli smiled and said amiably, "Boy, let him go. Don't worry. With me here, the Tang clan won't cause trouble for you in the future." Hearing St. Kuangli's words, Xiaochen didn't say anything. He casually threw Tang Tianqing to the side. Seeing this, the four elders of the Tang clan immediately stepped forward to check on Tang Tianqing's condition and then fed him healing pills. At this moment, be it Xiaochen or St. Kuangli, neither of them paid any attention to Tang Tianqing. However, Xiaochen didn't expect St. Kuangli to tap on Xiaochen's forehead without any warning. It was apparent that St. Kuangli was checking on Xiaochen's body. Or perhaps, he was checking on Xiaochen's Tao Gate. St. Kuangli's sudden action startled Xiaochen. He wasn't afraid that the eight-edged Tao Gate would be exposed. After all, Xiaochen had no intention of hiding it. Xiaochen was afraid of Xiaochen. After all, Xiaoxing was in his body right now. If St. Kuangli were to find out, who knew what would happen? However, Xiaochen had apparently underestimated Xiaoxing. Under St. Kuangli's investigation, he didn't detect Xiaoxing's presence. Xiaoxing wasn't exposed. At this moment, St. Kuangli didn't have the time to care about this. Looking into Xiaochen's body, St. Kuangli's expression became incomparably interesting. St. Kuangli initially guessed that Xiaochen's Tao Gate should be at the 6-edge or 7-edge level. But the truth was that St. Kuangli found it hard to accept. Xiaochen's Tao Gate wasn't at the 6-edge or 7-edge level. Instead, it was the highest level, the 8-edge Tao Gate. The 8-edge Tao Gate was considered one of the best in the ancient sacred sect. One had to know that among the ancient sacred sect's holy sons, only one of them had condensed the 8-edge Tao Gate. The rest of the holy sons were still at the 7-edge level. Saint Kuangli thought that he had overestimated Xiaochen. But in fact, he had underestimated Xiaochen's talent. While Saint Kuangli was in shock, Tang Tiancheng, who had woken up, bellowed furiously. "Xiaochen, I'm a personal disciple of the ancient sacred sect. If you dare to hurt me, the ancient sacred sect won't let you off. Sir Saint will definitely seek justice for me." Yesterday, the last chapter's title was wrong and couldn't be changed, but the main text didn't have any problems. "I'm sorry, brothers, please forgive me. These 2 days, I've already been on a drip for 3 days in a row. It's really uncomfortable. Windlass will adjust his state as soon as possible. I'll make up for the 2 chapters that I owe before. When I'm better, I'll erupt again." Chapter 718. Tang Tiancheng, who had just woken up, shouted angrily. However, his words sounded ridiculous, especially in the ears of Saint Kuangli. Tang Tiancheng was a direct disciple of the ancient saint sect, so he didn't put Xiaochen in his eyes at all. However, he didn't know that Xiaochen was a treasure in the eyes of Saint Kuangli. What kind of concept was the octagonal Dao Gate? If there were no accidents, Xiaochen would definitely become the holy son of the ancient saint sect in the future. Moreover, as long as Xiaochen went to the ancient saint sect, he would definitely become the holy son. Even an idiot would be able to see the difference between a direct disciple and a holy son. It was ridiculous that Tang Tiancheng was still shouting at the side. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even if Xiaochen killed Tang Tiancheng, the ancient saint sect wouldn't say anything. Not to mention that the ancient saint sect had rules. That was bullshit. If a holy son killed a direct disciple, would the ancient saint sect execute him? Obviously, this was impossible. Rules were useless to some people, especially in the world of martial artists. This point was even more incisively and vividly displayed. In the face of Tang Tiancheng's angry rebuke, Saint Kuangli immediately shouted angrily, "Shut up." Saint Kuangli was a saint of the ancient saint sect. Tang Tiancheng's voice came to an abrupt halt and he looked at Saint Kuangli in confusion. Tang Tiancheng was a direct disciple of the ancient saint sect, while Xiaochen was only a direct disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong. However, why was Saint Kuangli so protective of Xiaochen? Since Saint Kuangli appeared, he hadn't even looked at Tang Tiancheng. Instead, he was extremely concerned about Xiaochen. Why was he, Tang Tiancheng, the direct disciple of the ancient saint sect? He did not understand why Saint Kuangli was so protective of Xiaochen. However, what surprised Tang Tiancheng even more was that after a moment of shock, Saint Kuangli calmed down and smiled at Xiaochen. Then he turned to Tang Tiancheng and the 4 elders of the Tang family. "You should be glad that nothing happened to Xiaochen today. If Xiaochen had lost a single strand of hair today, then your entire Tang family would be buried together with him." His voice was calm but extremely cold. Hearing this, Tang Tiancheng was stunned, and so were the 4 elders of the Tang family. What did that mean? Saint Kuangli is on Xiaochen's side? How is this possible? The expressions of everyone from the Tang clan changed drastically. However, Saint Kuangli paid no attention to their expressions at all. He gazed into the distance and shouted in a deep voice, "Tang Meng, how long are you going to watch? Do you really think that I don't dare to go to your Tang family?" Saint Kuangli was not the only one who had been hiding in the dark. The head of the Tang family, Tang Tiancheng's father, Tang Meng, had also been hiding in the dark. After all, Tang Tiancheng was Tang Meng's only son. Naturally, Tang Meng was worried about him, so he had come personally just in case. Following Saint Kuangli's angry shout, Tang Meng's figure slowly appeared in the sky. Although he was a sage to be expert, Tang Meng's attitude towards Saint Kuangli was extremely respectful. He saluted Saint Kuangli and called out, "Saint Kuangli, humph, I don't care what the reason is between your Tang family and Xiaochen. Stop it now," Saint Kuangli said directly. Hearing this, Tang Tiancheng was stunned. What was going on? How could Saint Kuangli ask the Tang family to give up? Moreover, he didn't ask for the reason. It could even be said that he was being unreasonable. Tang Tiancheng was puzzled and extremely unwilling at the same time. However, Tang Meng's face suddenly sank when he heard St. Kuang Li's words. This was because at the same time, a voice transmission floated into Tang Meng's ears. Needless to say, this voice transmission was from St. Kuang Li. Xiaochen will soon be promoted to the quasi-holy son of the ancient saint sect. Tang Meng, I think you should know the consequences of opposing a quasi-holy son. At that time, let alone Tang Tianqing's life in the ancient saint sect, it's hard to say whether your Tang family can survive. You should consider it carefully. Xiaochen will soon be promoted to the quasi-holy son of the ancient saint sect. Tang Meng was stunned by St. Kuang Li's words. He naturally knew the consequences of opposing a quasi-holy son. If Xiaochen really became the quasi-holy son of the ancient saint sect, then it would be extremely easy for him to secretly kill Tang Tianqing in the ancient saint sect. After all, the quasi-holy son had real power in the ancient saint sect, just like the holy sons. Of course, his power wouldn't be as great as the holy sons. He kindly reminded Tang Meng. After a moment of silence, Tang Meng naturally knew what to do. She immediately came before Xiaochen and respectfully apologized to him. It had to be said that Tang Meng was a flexible person. To be able to sit in the position of patriarch of the Tang family, he naturally wasn't an idiot. He knew when to submit and when to be unyielding. Since Tang Meng had admitted his mistake, the matter naturally came to an end. Whether Tang Tianqing was willing or not, at the very least, the Tang family wouldn't provoke Xiaochen in the future. At the same time, Tang Meng would definitely repeatedly warn Tang Tianqing not to deal with Xiaochen. Xiaochen didn't care about Tang Meng's apology at all. Right now, Xiaochen only wanted to enter the ancient saint sect. St. Kuang Li already knew that he had condensed the octagonal Dao Gate, so he probably didn't need to go through Tianfengxing Zone. After all, from the looks of it, St. Kuang Li couldn't wait to bring him back to the ancient saint sect. This was a good thing for Xiaochen. However, before going to the ancient saint sect, Xiaochen still planned to make a trip to Tianfengxing Zone. After all, Mu Feng and the others were still there, so it was only right for him to say goodbye. Just as Xiaochen was thinking about this, St. Kuang Li had already ordered Tang Meng and the others to leave. At this moment, St. Kuang Li turned around and smiled at Xiaochen. "Ha, little guy, you really surprised this seat. Let's go, this seat will take you back to the ancient saint sect now." Just as Xiaochen thought, St. Kuang Li planned to take Xiaochen back to the ancient saint sect as soon as possible. After all, the octagonal Dao Gate was a genius among geniuses. Xiaochen naturally wouldn't refuse St. Kuang Li's words. However, he still replied truthfully. "Senior, disciple wants to go back to Tianfengxing Zone first before heading to the ancient saint sect." Facing St. Kuang Li, Xiaochen slowly replied. Hearing this, everyone's jaws dropped. As for St. Kuang Li, he actually didn't get angry, nor did he refuse. Instead, he happily agreed. Not only did he agree to Xiaochen's request, but he even planned to personally accompany Xiaochen to Tianfengxing Zone. "Ha, no problem, no problem. This seat happens to be free, so I'll accompany you to Tianfengxing Zone." Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 719. St. Kuang Li was obviously lying when he said that he was fine. As a saint and the city lord of suppressing Wind City, how could St. Kuang Li be fine? Why would he accompany Xiaochen to Tianfengxing Zone? St. Kuang Li did this to protect Xiaochen and safely escort him to the ancient sacred sect. This showed how much he valued Xiaochen. Without waiting for Xiaochen to reply, St. Kuang Li laughed and led Xiaochen into the teleportation array. In fact, Xiaochen originally wanted to tell St. Kuang Li that he would go to the ancient sacred sect after dealing with the matters in Tianfengxing Zone. Who would have thought that St. Kuang Li would be so overbearing and insist on personally escorting him to the ancient sacred sect? Under St. Kuang Li's lead, Xiaochen and St. Kuang Li's figures quickly disappeared into the teleportation array. Seeing this scene, the surrounding cultivators couldn't help but exclaim. "Am I seeing this right? St. Kuang Li actually personally escorted Xiaochen to Tianfengxing Zone?" This. Clearly, everyone was also shocked by St. Kuang Li's actions. How much did he value Xiaochen to personally accompany him to Tianfeng Zone? The development of the matter was beyond everyone's expectations. Of course, it wouldn't be long before everyone present knew the answer. When Xiaochen became the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect, through the teleportation array, Xiaochen and Saint Kuangli arrived at Tianfeng Zone in the blink of an eye. When they walked out of the teleportation array, the Tianfeng Zone elder who was in charge of guarding the teleportation array thought that it was only the disciples who had returned, but when he looked up, he saw Xiaochen and Saint Kuangli. Recognizing Saint Kuangli at a glance, the elder shuddered and hurriedly got up before Saint Kuangli. He respectfully said, "Lord Saint Kuangli, what brings you here?" Saint Kuangli's sudden appearance at Saint Tianfeng's place was naturally very strange. However, Saint Kuangli didn't mind it at all. He waved his hand and smiled. I'm just taking a stroll. You don't have to worry about me. I'm going to find Brother Tianfeng for a drink." Saint Kuangli didn't tell anyone about Xiaochen. As soon as he finished speaking, he looked at Xiaochen and smiled. "Kid, you can go by yourself. When you're done, come find me at Brother Tianfeng's place." Since they had already arrived at Tianfeng Zone, it was clearly inappropriate for Saint Kuangli to follow Xiaochen. Moreover, Xiaochen probably didn't want a saint by his side all the time. In addition, there wouldn't be any problems in Tianfeng Zone, so Saint Kuangli prepared to leave and find Saint Tianfeng. Hearing Saint Kuangli's words, Xiaochen respectfully nodded and saw him off. After Saint Kuangli left, Xiaochen stepped out of the teleportation array and walked back to his residence. This time, he came back mainly to say goodbye to Mufeng, Wang Fang, Wang Zong, and a few other people he was familiar with. Since he was going to the ancient sacred sect, he naturally had to let them know. After returning to Tianfeng Zone for a little more than 2 months, Xiaochen actually felt that things were still the same, but people had changed. Yes, 2 months ago, his strength was only at the level of one of the top 10 direct disciples. But now, it was no exaggeration to say that even Wang Zong was probably no match for Xiaochen. And all of this was thanks to Xiaochen. It could be said that with Xiaochen by his side, Xiaochen's martial path was like adding wings to a tiger. At the same time, Saint Kuangli appeared at the top of Tianfeng Mountain in Saint Tianfeng's residence. As soon as he saw Saint Tianfeng sitting cross-legged at the top of the mountain, Saint Kuangli's rough voice rang out. Brother Tianfeng, great news." Saint Kuangli's character was incomparably bold. Hearing this, Saint Tianfeng slowly opened his eyes and said unhappily, "Why didn't you guard Jinfeng City? Why did you come to Tianfeng Zone?" Isn't it because of great news? Brother Tianfeng, Xiaochen has broken through to the Tao Gate realm. Saint Kuangli replied. "Oh? Xiaochen has broken through to the Tao Gate realm?" "Yes, and do you know what level the Tao Gate that kid condensed is?" Saint Kuangli said excitedly. Saint Tianfeng shook his head slightly, indicating that he didn't know. Seeing this, Saint Kuangli's eyes lit up and he laughed. Let me tell you, Xiaochen has condensed an octagonal Tao Gate." Octagonal Tao Gate. Hearing this, even Saint Tianfeng revealed a strange expression. Obviously, he didn't expect Xiaochen to be able to condense an octagonal Tao Gate. In addition to being shocked, Saint Tianfeng also asked suspiciously, "Are you sure?" "Of course, I've personally checked it. It's indeed an octagonal Tao Gate." Now that he was sure that Xiaochen had condensed an octagonal Tao Gate, Saint Tianfeng said indifferently, "So you plan to bring him to the ancient saint sect?" "That's right. That kid already has the cultivation of the Tao Gate realm and has even condensed the 8-edged Tao Gate. It's only natural for him to go to the ancient sacred sect. After all, becoming the quasi-holy son will bring him great benefits." Saint Tianfeng didn't hide anything from Saint Tianfeng. Saint Tianfeng didn't object to this and only sighed. The octagonal Tao Gate is indeed not bad, but Xiaochen's cultivation is still a bit low. Can he pass the prospective saint's test? If he's given another year or 2, it'll probably be safer, right? If one wanted to become a prospective holy son of the ancient saint sect, it wasn't something that could be done just by having enough talent. One had to go through a test. Furthermore, the difficulty of the test wasn't low at all. After all, the ancient saint sect didn't wish for their prospective holy son to be an empty shell with nothing but talent. According to the normal process, Shaochen should wait another 2 years. At that time, his cultivation would have increased, and passing the prospective saint's test wouldn't be a problem. However, it was indeed a bit too rushed right now. Saint Quanlei laughed heartily when he heard Saint Tianfeng's words. "Ha, it's fine, it's fine. This kid will go to the ancient saint sect no matter what. It's good to let him get used to it first. He'll become the prospective saint in a year or 2 anyway." The two saints discussed Shaochen. At the same time, Shaochen returned to his residence. As soon as he entered, he saw that his 4 women were all bruised and battered. Clearly, they had just been beaten up. Their originally beautiful faces were now incomparably miserable because of their injuries. Seeing this scene, Shaochen's mood immediately turned bad and his face sank. Who did this? These injuries were definitely caused by someone. Faced with Shaochen's question, the 4 maids originally didn't want to say anything. However, they couldn't withstand Shaochen's interrogation and finally told Shaochen that it was Yitang. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 720. It turned out that not long after Shaochen went to Jinfeng City, Yitang returned to the sect. After learning that Shaochen had killed He Chushuan, Yitang was burning with rage. He was even prepared to kill Shaochen in Jinfeng City. Unfortunately, Jinfeng City was under martial law at that time due to the Wind Ghost's attack, so Yitang had no way to enter. Since he couldn't do anything to Shaochen, Yitang naturally shifted his anger to others. The disciples of the Tianqi sect and those related to Shaochen, including Shaochen's 4 maids, all suffered Yitang's revenge. Dozens of Tianqi sect disciples were even killed by Yitang. Seeing that Yitang was planning to kill everyone related to Shaochen at all costs, Wang Zong finally stepped in and made Yitang calm down a little. Of course, it was impossible for Wang Zong to protect the disciples of the Tianqi sect all the time. Therefore, for the past 2 months, the disciples of the Tianqi sect had been living extremely miserably in Tianfengsheng Zone. After telling Shaochen all of these things, the 4 girls still had worried expressions on their faces when they were done. "Senior brother Shaochen, we're fine. Don't be impulsive." "That's right. Senior brother Shaochen, don't be impulsive. As the saying goes, it's never too late for a gentleman to take revenge 10 years later. It's never too late to deal with Yitang when senior brother's cultivation is successful in the future." The 4 girls were afraid that Shaochen would impulsively look for Yitang now, so they tried to persuade him. After all, Yitang was the 3rd personal disciple and was very strong. Of course, the 4 girls didn't know that Yitang was in the past. The current Shaochen was even stronger than him. If it was 2 months ago, Shaochen might have been a little afraid of Yitang. But now, Yitang was simply a clown. He might even be inferior to Tang Tiancheng. With a sneer on his face, Shaochen said indifferently, "Isn't it never too late for a gentleman to take revenge 10 years later? Unfortunately, I'm not a gentleman. What I believe in is that revenge is never too late." After saying that, Shaochen didn't care about the 4 girls' persuasion and directly soared into the air. Seeing this, the 4 girls anxiously stood in the courtyard and stamped their feet. Standing in the air, Shaochen locked his eyes on Yitang's residence. Then, he pointed his finger and directly displayed the dragon spring sword finger. A dragon shadow dragon roared and rushed toward Yitang's residence. A dragon's roar resounded, and a dragon image. A dragon roar. Such a huge commotion naturally attracted the attention of many people. The direct disciples and the core disciples nearby all turned their gazes to the sky. When they saw Shaochen's figure, everyone had a strange expression on their faces as they whispered softly. "This Shaochen is back. Residence, 2. Destroyed. It's over. Is there going to be an all-out war?" Over the past 2 months, Yitang has been madly retaliating against Shaochen. Now, as soon as Xiaochen came back, he directly destroyed Yiteng's house. This is really going to be an all-out war. Almost everyone knew that Yiteng had been madly retaliating against Xiaochen over the past 2 months. Now, Xiaochen's actions were obviously in response to Yiteng's actions. Faced with such a situation, the expressions of many disciples changed greatly. Was there going to be a war between the two direct disciples? Everyone was amazed, but most people were not optimistic about Xiaochen. After all, Xiaochen was ranked last among the top 10 direct disciples, while Yiteng was ranked third. No matter how they looked at it, Yiteng had a higher chance of winning. It could even be said that Xiaochen had almost no chance of winning. However, what everyone did not expect was that after destroying Yiteng's house with one finger, Xiaochen's voice sounded. Under the spread of spiritual power, it almost spread throughout Tianfeng Zone. Yiteng, get out here. As soon as Xiaochen's words came out, everyone's jaws dropped. Whether it was the direct disciples, core disciples, or ordinary disciples, their expressions changed dramatically. Everyone thought that Xiaochen was crazy, but only Xiaochen knew that he was not crazy. He wanted to kill someone. Since entering Tianfeng Zone, Xiaochen and the Iron Sword sect had been entangled with each other for several years. During this period, both sides had used various means. After being entangled for so long, coupled with Yiteng's actions this time, Xiaochen decided that he might as well settle it once and for all today. Therefore, Xiaochen wanted to kill Yiteng in front of many Tianfeng Zone disciples today. At this moment, Xiaochen was incomparably domineering. He stood in the air, his black hair fluttering in the wind. As soon as Xiaochen's voice fell, a terrifying spiritual power fluctuation soared into the sky. Then, Yiteng, who was wearing a Tianfeng robe, appeared in front of Xiaochen without anyone noticing. Yiteng's eyes flashed with anger. Previously, Yiteng was not in his house. Now that he saw Xiaochen destroy his house and shamelessly ask him to get out, the killing intent in Yiteng's heart rose to the extreme. The two stood facing each other, and the atmosphere instantly became tense. Facing Yiteng, Xiaochen finally saw through his cultivation. He was at the peak of the Dao validation realm. It was not Yiteng's cultivation. At the same time, Yiteng shouted coldly. Xiaochen, there was a path to heaven, but you didn't take it. Instead, you barged into hell. I was worried that I couldn't find you, but you delivered yourself to me. Today, I want to see who can save you. Yiteng had been looking for Xiaochen. Now that Xiaochen had finally shown up, Yiteng naturally did not hide the killing intent in his heart. Hearing this, Xiaochen sneered. There was a path to heaven, but you didn't take it. Instead, you barged into hell. Not bad, not bad. It's very suitable to describe your actions. Facing Yiteng, Xiaochen was fearless. Seeing this, Yiteng was completely furious. With a roar, Yiteng was about to attack, but at this moment, a shout was heard. Stop! Along with this shout, Wang Zong's figure appeared between Xiaochen and Yiteng. Seeing Wang Zong's appearance, Yiteng's face darkened. Wang Zong, you still want to stop me? During this period, Wang Zong had indeed stopped Yiteng many times. However, in the face of Yiteng's angry roar, Wang Zong did not pay attention to him at all. Instead, he looked at Xiaochen, as if to say, are you stupid? You know that Yiteng wants to deal with you, but you delivered yourself to him. Wang Zong was a little speechless at Xiaochen's action, but he still said, Xiaochen, you go first. I will help you stop Yiteng. Don't do anything stupid. Wang Zong naturally did not think that Xiaochen would be a match for Yiteng. However, after hearing Wang Zong's words, Xiaochen smiled slightly. Senior brother Wang Zong, I know very well what I am doing. You bastard, do you really know what you are doing? Hearing this, Wang Zong anxiously scolded. Facing Wang Zong's anxiousness, Xiaochen's smile did not diminish. Of course, today, I will kill Yiteng here. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 721. Today, I'm going to kill Yiteng. Xiao said flatly. Wang Zong was stunned when he heard Xiao Chen's words. He wondered if Xiao had lost his mind. Kill Yiteng? Yiteng's strength ranked third in Tianfengxing zone. Xiao was no match for him. Of course, Wang Zong's understanding of Xiao was still limited to 2 months ago. Moreover, even if Wang Zong knew that Xiao had gone out to train for more than 2 months, he would never have thought that Xiao would possess the strength to defeat Yiteng in just 2 months. Because it was unrealistic. What could he do in 2 months? This was especially true after reaching the Dao confirmation realm. More than 2 months was just the time it took to enter seclusion. Of course, how could Wang Zong know what kind of great opportunity Xiao had obtained in the past 2 months in the Wind Plain? This great opportunity was comparable to 10 years of bitter cultivation for Xiao. This was the horror of opportunities. A heaven-defying opportunity was enough to make one soar to the sky. Such things were common in the world of martial artists. Wang Zong couldn't understand Xiao. Yiteng, who was standing at the side, burst into laughter after a brief moment of shock. His laughter was full of contempt. At the same time, he looked at Xiao as if he was looking at an idiot. "Ha, what did you say? You want to kill me? Ha, funny, really funny. This is the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life." Yiteng clutched his stomach and laughed. Xiao said that he wanted to kill him here. This made Yiteng so angry that he laughed. How dare an ant say that he wanted to kill him? His laughter was filled with disdain and mockery. However, before Yiteng could finish his words, his laughter stopped abruptly. This was because Xiao had appeared in front of him without him noticing. He grabbed Yiteng by the neck and lifted him up. They didn't see how Xiao moved. Yiteng didn't see it, and neither did Wang Zong. When they came back to their senses, Xiao had lifted Yiteng up like a chicken. Yiteng was like a duck that had been grabbed by the neck. A second ago, he was mocking Xiao. Now, there was only deep shock and disbelief in his eyes. Yiteng was not the only one who was shocked. Wang Zong and the other personal disciples were shocked as well. They never thought that Xiao would be able to subdue Yiteng so easily. Yiteng did not even have a chance to react. Under countless shocked gazes, Xiao sneered and said, "Do you think it's funny? I think it's just a normal thing because if I want to kill you, it's as easy as killing an ant. Just like now." After saying that, Xiao threw a punch at Yiteng's abdomen. Yiteng spat out a mouthful of blood from the pain. After the punch landed, Xiao exclaimed softly, "You're not crippled." "Not bad, but so what? If 1 punch doesn't work, then 2. If 2 punches don't work, then 3. Let's see how many punches your Dantian can take." With the previous punch, Xiao was prepared to cripple Yiteng's cultivation. However, to Xiao surprise, Yiteng's Dantian didn't shatter under the punch. Yiteng was indeed a personal disciple. The hardness of his Dantian couldn't be compared with that of an ordinary person. But so what? It didn't matter at all. After saying that, Xiao clenched his fist again. Seeing this, Yiteng's eyes finally showed a touch of fear. Without thinking much, he immediately struggled with all his might and shouted, "Xiao, how dare you? Stop, stop." Yiteng struggled with all his might, but it was all in vain. Xiao fist arrived as expected. With a bang, it landed on Yiteng's abdomen again. Yiteng spat out another mouthful of blood. However, it wasn't over yet. After the punch landed, Xiao didn't stop. His fists continued to land on Yiteng's abdomen like raindrops. Bang, bang, bang. A total of 8 punches sounded. After 8 punches in a row, Yiteng only heard a muffled bang in his body. His Dantian was directly shattered. After his Dantian was forcefully blasted apart, Yiteng's aura quickly withered. His face also instantly became as pale as paper. The numerous disciples who had witnessed the entire process by the side could not help but gulp down large mouthfuls of saliva. Crippled. Yiteng, who ranked third among the top 10 personal disciples, was crippled by Xiao just like that. It was as if they had seen a ghost. Everyone, including Wang Zong, couldn't believe the scene in front of them. How could this be? It was too exaggerated. From the beginning to the end, Yi Teng didn't even have the slightest ability to resist. Just like that, Xiaochen used the most violent and barbaric method to destroy his dantian and cripple his cultivation. Without his cultivation, Yi Teng's aura weakened as he looked at Xiaochen and said with difficulty, Xiaochen, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Yi Teng was already in the grasp of Xiaochen like a dead dog. Hearing Yi Teng's weak voice, Xiaochen said expressionlessly, Become a ghost? We'll talk about it when you can. After saying that, Xiaochen waved his hand and threw Yi Teng's body into the air. Then, in front of everyone, Xiaochen pointed his finger and used the Tai sword finger. A thick beam of spiritual energy shot out and immediately engulfed Yi Teng. Yi Teng didn't even have time to scream. When the light of the Tai sword finger dissipated, Yi Teng's body had already disappeared. Since they couldn't see Yi Teng, the crowd naturally didn't think that Yi Teng had dodged Xiaochen's attack. Even his cultivation had been crippled. At this moment, there wasn't even a trace of him left behind. Silence. Following Yi Teng's death, the entire Tianfeng zone fell into a strange silence. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the figure in the sky. Facing the third direct disciple, Yi Teng had been directly killed. What kind of concept was that? After more than 2 months, Xiaochen had actually grown to such a level. Killing Yi Teng was as easy as slaughtering a chicken. Looking at Xiaochen's back, Wang Zong was also shocked. From the methods Xiaochen had just displayed, perhaps even he wouldn't be much better than Xiaochen. Xiaochen. You? Wang Zong was completely stunned. Wang Zong stammered as he was completely shocked by what he saw. Hearing this, Xiaochen turned around and quickly retracted his aura. He had returned to his usual amiable and approachable self. He said with a smile on his face, What's wrong, senior brother Wang Zong? I didn't do anything stupid, right? No. Hearing Xiaochen's joke, Wang Zong instinctively nodded. What a joke! Xiaochen did something stupid? How could that be possible? Yi Teng was simply acting recklessly. However, Xiaochen's improvement was really hard to accept. Wasn't this just like the saying, a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 722. As the third-ranked direct disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong, Yi Teng was killed by Xiaochen just like that. The surrounding disciples were dumbfounded, especially the disciples of the Iron Sword sect. Their faces were filled with horror. That was Yi Teng, but now he was squashed to death by Xiaochen like an ant. Wang Zong joked with Wang Zong. After nodding awkwardly in response, Wang Zong said worriedly, Xiaochen, you killed Yi Teng just like that. If the sect blames you, at this point, even if Wang Zong couldn't figure it out, Yi Teng's death was a fact. Killing a fellow disciple in the sect, and a direct disciple at that, was no joke. If the sect's higher-ups blamed him, Xiaochen's outcome would be, he wanted to say that Xiaochen was in big trouble, but when the words came to his mouth, Wang Zong didn't know how to say it. He could only remind Xiaochen tactfully. Perhaps it was because Xiaochen's method of killing Yi Teng was too brutal, or perhaps it was because Xiaochen's strength had improved, but Wang Zong couldn't help but feel a little nervous when facing Xiaochen at this moment. He could say whatever he wanted before, but now he couldn't. Perhaps this was what people often said, strength represented distance. In short, in front of Xiaochen, Wang Zong had unconsciously brought a touch of respect. Knowing what Wang Zong was worried about, Xiaochen didn't care about it. He had only killed Yi Teng, and things weren't over yet. He had said that he would uproot the Iron Sword sect today. How could he just kill Yi Teng? Xiaochen didn't want to see such a thing happen again. He still had many friends in Tianfeng Xingzong. He didn't want to see them being bullied again. Moreover, Xiaochen was about to go to the ancient sacred sect. Whether he would have a chance to come to Tianfengshengzong in the future was another matter. Therefore, Xiaochen planned to settle everything today. His gaze shifted to the core disciple area. There were many core disciples in the Iron Sword sect. They were all involved in bullying the disciples of the Celestial Equal sect. The killing intent in Wang Zong's eyes once again gathered. Sensing the change in Xiaochen, Wang Zong's gaze also looked towards the core disciple area. Suddenly realizing something, Wang Zong asked somewhat uncertainly. Xiaochen, you're not serious, are you? They had already guessed what Xiaochen was going to do next, but it was too shocking. How could Xiaochen do this? Killing Yiteng was already a big mistake. If Xiaochen continued to attack, then Wang Zong didn't dare to continue thinking about it. Although Wang Zong thought that he was also a person who didn't have any taboos, compared to Xiaochen, it was simply insignificant. Wang Zong didn't dare to think about what Xiaochen might do next. Wang Zong's face was filled with horror. In response, Xiaochen smiled and said, "Today is the day to settle everything. How can one Yiteng be enough?" Having said that, Xiaochen took a step forward and his figure instantly appeared above the core disciple area. His gaze swept across the core disciples of the Iron Sword sect. Without hesitation, Xiaochen pointed his finger and immediately displayed the Chun Jun sword finger. A golden sword ray flashed. While everyone was still in a daze, the golden sword ray suddenly pierced through a core disciple of the Iron Sword sect. Another person was killed. Following the death of this core disciple from the Iron Sword sect, the minds of the surrounding disciples, who were still in a state of shock, went blank. What's going on? Why won't he stop after killing Yiteng? Could it be that Xiaochen intends to kill all the disciples of the Iron Sword sect? One had to know that there were thousands of disciples of the Iron Sword sect. Some people had already guessed Xiaochen's thoughts. In response, everyone was shocked. Was he going to massacre Tianfengshengzong? As if to confirm the disciples' guesses, after killing a core disciple, Xiaochen said faintly, "Disciples of the Iron Sword sect who are above the Tao querying realm, die." He clearly stated what he was going to do next. Kill all the disciples of the Iron Sword sect who were above the Tao querying realm. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire Tianfengshengzong was in an uproar. If what Xiaochen said was true, how many disciples of the Iron Sword sect would die? It shouldn't be less than 1,000, right? Crazy, absolutely crazy. Hearing this, everyone thought that Xiaochen must be crazy. If he did this, Tianfengshengzong would definitely not let him go, even if he was a direct disciple. The disciples thought that Xiaochen must be crazy. However, in the next second, Xiaochen had already begun to act. The Chun Jun sword finger was constantly used. Rays of golden sword light constantly fell from the sky, shooting towards the disciples of the Iron Sword sect. In the face of Xiaochen's attack, the core disciples had no ability to resist at all. Not long after, 5 core disciples of the Iron Sword sect were killed. It was a completely one-sided massacre. Facing the scene in front of them, everyone was stunned. By the time they came back to their senses, Xiaochen had already killed all the core disciples of the Iron Sword sect. At this time, Xiaochen had already gone to the ordinary disciple area. Unsurprisingly, with the arrival of Xiaochen, the ordinary disciple area was naturally set off a bloody storm. All the disciples of the Iron Sword sect whose cultivation was above the Tao querying realm were found and killed one by one. In the face of Xiaochen's merciless massacre, the disciples of the Iron Sword sect were completely scared out of their wits. One by one, they fled frantically. They were scared, really scared. They thought that the sect was the safest place, but now, Tianfengshengzong had become a nightmare in their hearts. The disciples of the Iron Sword sect were scared out of their wits. On the other hand, the disciples of the Celestial Equal sect were extremely excited. Without needing Xiaochen to say anything, everyone had already spontaneously organized themselves to block the disciples of the Iron Sword sect who were fleeing in all directions. Compared to the disciples of the Iron Sword sect and the Celestial Equal sect, the disciples of the other sects were only in shock. Xiaochen didn't attack them, so they weren't in any danger. However, everything that happened today had indeed subverted the knowledge of all the disciples. There was actually someone who dared to start a massacre in Tianfeng Zone. Amidst the shock, some disciples suddenly reacted. Shaochen was already in such a state, but why hadn't the elders appeared yet? Where are the elders? Why haven't they appeared? Could it be that the higher-ups have tacitly approved of senior brother Shaochen's actions? It had been so long, but not a single elder of Tianfeng Zone had appeared. While the disciples were wondering, all the half-sage elders gathered in the main hall of Tianfeng Zone. At this moment, the elder in charge of the disciplinary hall, Yanxing, was angrily looking at Yifeng and questioning him coldly. Yifeng, what do you mean by this? Why aren't you allowing the disciplinary hall to take action? Shaochen wantonly killed people in the sect. Why are you doing this? Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 723. It was not that the elders did not know what had happened in the sect, but they had all gathered in the main hall after receiving Yifeng's summons. As the elder in charge of punishment, Yanxing was naturally duty-bound to punish Shaochen for killing so many people in the sect. Furthermore, Yanxing was an extremely stubborn old man. Therefore, he was furious when Yifeng refused to take action for a long time. He didn't care that Yifeng was the great elder and questioned him directly. In the face of Yanxing's cold questioning, Yifeng did not argue with him. He knew this old man's character very well. Yifeng knew that if he didn't give him an explanation, the old man might really hit him. Left with no choice, Yifeng could only tell the truth. This is the Lord's order. Old man Yan, if you have any dissatisfaction, you can ask him yourself when he comes. Yifeng wasn't lying. It was indeed the Tianfeng Saint's idea to gather all the elders and ignore Shaochen. As for the reason, it was very simple. It was because he couldn't punish Shaochen. There was no other way. Shaochen was no longer a disciple of the Tianfeng Zone, but a disciple of the ancient sacred sect. How could the Tianfeng Zone punish Shaochen? In fact, the Tianfeng Saint had already noticed when Shaochen killed Yiteng. After asking Yifeng, he found out that Shaochen wanted to take revenge. The Tianfeng Saint didn't pay much attention to Yiteng's actions in the past 2 months. What a joke! Of course, he wouldn't care about such trivial matters. Knowing that Shaochen wanted to take revenge, the Tianfeng Saint quickly decided to let Shaochen do whatever he wanted. Yiteng could only blame himself for provoking Shaochen. In any place, there were always some people who were above the rules. The rules could not restrain them, and Shaochen clearly belonged to this group of people. Tianfeng Saint didn't intend to pursue the matter with Shaochen. Of course, Shaochen couldn't kill the innocent. Tianfeng Saint chose to turn a blind eye to Yiteng's actions. After all, it wasn't difficult to choose between Shaochen and Yiteng. Shaochen was also very smart. He did not cross the Tianfeng Saint's bottom line. Even when facing the disciples of the Iron Sword sect, Shaochen did not choose to kill them all. He only killed those who were a threat. As for the others, even if they held a grudge against him, they would not be able to do anything to him or the people around him in the future. It could be said that Shaochen and the Tianfeng Saint had a tacit understanding. Shaochen knew that the Tianfeng Saint would not blame him. He also knew the severity of the matter. As time passed, the elders of Tianfeng Zone only appeared after Shaochen killed all the disciples of the Iron Sword sect who were above the Dao Querying realm. They were led by Yifeng. After massacring hundreds of people, the disciples of the Heavenly Wind Saint sect greeted the elders one after another as they waited anxiously for the elders to speak. Obviously, the elders had appeared to judge Shaochen. Since he dared to kill so many disciples of the same sect, Shaochen was definitely going to die. Many disciples thought so. Under everyone's gaze, Shaochen calmly walked in front of Yifeng and the other elders. Facing Shaochen, Yanxing shouted angrily. Shaochen, you're really out of control. I really want to cripple you with my own hands. Yanxing was obviously furious at Shaochen's actions. However, from his words, it was obvious that the Tianfeng Saint had already made his decision. This decision made Yanqing feel helpless because he was destined to not be able to punish Xiaochen. Xiaochen ignored Yanqing. He had dealt with him before and knew that this old man was a stubborn old man. It was useless to say anything to him. He looked directly at Yifeng and waited for him to speak. Xiaochen had already predicted the outcome before he made his move. This was definitely not Xiaochen's impulsive action. After all, Xiaochen was not stupid enough to perish together with Yiteng just for Yiteng. It was because he was not afraid of the rules of Tianfeng Xingzong that Xiaochen dared to do this. Facing Xiaochen's stare and seeing how calm he was, Yifeng smiled bitterly in his heart. This kid was absolutely fearless from the very beginning. He knew that Tianfeng Saint would not do anything to him. He had to admit that this brat was very smart and knew his limits. At the very least, when the Tianfeng Saint knew the outcome, he was not angry at all. On the contrary, he smiled with satisfaction. Xiaochen, this brat is not bad. He knows his limits. Yifeng, go and settle this matter. This was what the Tianfeng Saint said to Yifeng. Obviously, the Tianfeng Saint was not angry at Xiaochen's actions. On the contrary, he was very happy. If others knew about this, they would probably think that the Tianfeng Saint was crazy. Xiaochen had brazenly killed a fellow disciple in the sect, and the Tianfeng Saint actually praised him. When he thought about how the Tianfeng Saint dealt with Xiaochen, even Yifeng found it hard to believe. The Tianfeng Saint had only expelled Xiaochen from the sect. What a joke! That was enough to kill him several times, but the Tianfeng Saint had only expelled Xiaochen from the sect. Moreover, Yifeng knew very well that being expelled from Tianfeng Xingzong meant nothing to Xiaochen. Xiaochen could no longer be considered a disciple of Tianfeng Xingzong, because Xiaochen would soon enter the ancient sage sect. Yifeng sighed and announced the Heavenly Wind Saint's punishment in a loud voice. Cough, Xiaochen killed a fellow disciple. Since it was pardonable, he has been expelled from Tianfeng Xingzong as punishment. With a light cough, Yifeng's voice resounded in every corner of the Heavenly Wind Sacred Sect. Hearing this, many disciples were stunned once again, and some even whispered. Expelled from the Heavenly Wind Sacred Sect? That's it? At first, the disciples thought that Yifeng had not finished speaking, but after staring at him for a while, they did not wait for him to continue. It seemed that Xiaochen's punishment was indeed expulsion from Tianfeng Xingzong. But how was that possible? Killing a fellow disciple was already a capital offense. Needless to say, Xiaochen had killed hundreds of people. According to the sect's rules, Xiaochen would have been sentenced to death 100 times over. Just the sentence of being expelled from the sect was enough to cover up the matter. Was this really king punishment? No matter how one looked at it, it was the Tianfeng Saint who was protecting Xiaochen. No one thought that the Tianfeng Saint would give Xiaochen such a light punishment. It could even be said that it was not painful at all. Facing the doubts of the disciples, Yifeng did not explain too much. He only looked at Xiaochen and scolded him in a low voice. You little brat, you really don't know how to make people worry. Alright, say goodbye to everyone today. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning, and you can follow the Tianfeng Saint to the ancient sage sect. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 724. Yifeng and the other half-saint elders already knew that Xiaochen had broken through to the Dao Gate realm and would be heading to the ancient saint sect soon. Because of this, the elders were not surprised by the Tianfeng Saint's decision. It was indeed reasonable. Even the stubborn Yanqing accepted this outcome even though he was unhappy. Of course, such a result could only happen to Xiaochen. If there was anyone who felt that they could imitate Xiaochen and harm their own disciples in the future, then what awaited them would most likely be severe punishment from the disciplinary hall. If one did not have the strength to transcend the rules, it was best to follow the rules obediently. Otherwise, it would only be playing with fire. Hearing Yifeng's words, Xiaochen bowed respectfully and said, "Thank you, First Elder." "No need to thank me. Anyway, you won't be able to trouble me in the future. Alright, go. Remember, don't cause any more trouble." He Feng scolded Xiaochen with a smile and then left with the elders. As for the aftermath, it would naturally be taken care of by the deacon of Tianfeng Zone. Xiaochen did not need to worry about it. In short, what seemed to be an earth-shattering event was left unsettled in the end. The result was that Xiaochen was expelled from Tianfeng Zone. This was absolutely shocking. Without a doubt, this was the first time in the history of Tianfeng Zone. Xiaochen had killed hundreds of his fellow disciples, but he was not punished at all. Xiaochen did not care about the astonishment and thoughts of the disciples. After all, he was going to leave tomorrow. After returning to his residence and comforting the four girls, Xiaochen planned to gather his close friends and have a meal at the Cool Breeze restaurant. It could also be considered a farewell. However, before Xiaochen could order people to invite them, they had already taken the initiative to come to his residence. Wang Zong was the first to arrive with Wang Fang. Then, Mu Feng, Nangong Yan, and the others came one after another to Xiaochen's residence. Looking at Xiaochen, Wang Fang and Nangong Yan looked as if they were looking at something new. They stared at Xiaochen for a long time without saying a word. Xiaochen felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by the two girls. Finally, he asked with a smile. "What's wrong with you guys? Don't you recognize me?" "No, we were just wondering if you were the Lord's illegitimate son." "How could it be so simple? I thought you were dead this time." Wang Fang replied after hearing Xiaochen's words with a smile. "That's right, Xiaochen. I really can't see through you now that you've returned. Let's not talk about your combat strength. After causing such a huge mess, you were only expelled from the sect. Really? If it were me, I'm afraid that I would have already been sent to the little black room in the punishment hall." Wang Zong chimed in as Wang Fang's voice faded. What happened today was really unexpected. In response, Xiaochen shook his head with a smile. He wanted to say that when you become the prospective holy son of the ancient saint sect, you can do it too. However, Xiaochen did not say it out loud in the end. After joking around for a while, Nangong Yan was the first to stop smiling. She said with some reluctance, "But, although he's not, Xiaochen will be kicked out of Tianfeng Zone in the future." Hearing Nangong Yan's words, everyone's expression became serious. Indeed, Xiaochen had been kicked out of Tianfeng Zone, which meant that he would be leaving soon. Everyone was a little disappointed. In response, Xiaochen smiled and comforted them. "Don't worry, I'm indeed leaving Tianfeng Zone, but I'm not homeless. This time, I plan to go to the ancient saint sect, and the Lord has agreed to it." Xiaochen told everyone that he was going to the ancient saint sect. Of course, he did not say that he was going to the ancient saint sect to participate in the prospective Holy Son assessment. After all, the prospective Holy Son assessment was indeed a little scary. Hearing Xiaochen's explanation, Wang Fang was the first to react. She said, "Well, so you and the Lord have already discussed it. That's why the Lord wants to kick you out of the ancient saint sect. In this case, the punishment will not hurt you at all. After all, if you enter the ancient saint sect, it means that you're leaving Tianfeng Zone." After knowing that Xiaochen was going to the ancient saint sect, everyone realized that the punishment given to Xiaochen by Tianfeng Saint was absolutely meaningless. Some people were jealous of Tianfeng Saint's preference for Xiaochen. Of course, they were more happy for Xiaochen. In this way, everyone was happy. Because they were going to leave tomorrow, everyone went to the Cool Breeze restaurant to have a big meal. In the future, they would no longer be disciples of Tianfeng Zone, so it was useless to keep the contribution points. After the meal, Xiaochen gave all his contribution points to Mu Feng. After all, Mu Feng still needed to cultivate in Tianfeng Zone. These contribution points were obviously of great help to him. After a hearty drinking session, although everyone was reluctant to leave, there was no such thing as an eternal banquet. After leaving the Cool Breeze restaurant, everyone said goodbye to Xiaochen one by one. "Brother Xiaochen, be careful when you go to the ancient saint sect," Mu Feng said. "Xiaochen, be careful when you go to the ancient saint sect. When my brother and I go to the ancient saint sect, you have to take care of us," Wang Fang said. "Xiaochen, I will also go to the ancient saint sect. At that time, you have to protect me too. Nan Gongyan said. See you at the ancient saint sect. Wang Zong said. Everyone said goodbye to Xiaochen one by one. In the end, Xiaochen also smiled and nodded. Well, see you at the ancient saint sect. When you come, I will definitely treat you to the best wine in the entire ancient saint state. Then it's a promise? Yes, it's a promise. After bidding farewell to everyone, Xiaochen returned to his residence. As soon as he entered, Xiaochen's 4 maidservants came to greet him. They took Xiaochen's coat and poured tea for Xiaochen. Although they were serving Xiaochen as usual, Xiaochen could clearly sense the dejection in their hearts. Xiaochen asked with a smile, "What are you waiting for? What's wrong? Why do you all look so down?" When they heard Xiaochen's words, the 4 maidservants' eyes turned red and they choked with sobs. We just thought that young master is going to the ancient saint sect tomorrow. And the 4 of them were maidservants who had followed Xiaochen ever since Xiaochen joined the Tianfengxing zone. Now that Xiaochen was leaving, it was easy to imagine their fates. There were only 2 paths. They could either become ordinary disciples of the Tianfengxing zone, or be assigned to other personal disciples as maidservants. But to them, neither path was what they wanted. In their hearts, they wanted to follow Xiaochen more. Xiaochen was approachable and never treated them as servants. Moreover, Xiaochen was handsome and dashing. The 4 maidservants had long fallen in love with him. They did not ask for anything else. They just wanted to be by Xiaochen's side and be his maidservants. That was enough. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. If you want to chat about Sword Master of 8 Desolations with more like-minded people, follow excellent reading literature on WeChat. Chat about life, find friends. Chapter 725. The 4 women were all in low spirits and their eyes were slightly red. Their watery eyes looked like they were about to burst into tears. Xiaochen naturally knew what the 4 women were thinking when he saw their expressions. He called out their names one by one in a gentle voice. Fei Mei, Enlan, Lu Zhu, Si Ju. What's wrong? Don't you want to go to the ancient sacred sect with me? Fei Mei and the others didn't react at first when they heard Xiaochen call out their names one by one. They held back their tears and responded. However, they were stunned when they heard Xiaochen's last sentence. What's wrong? Don't you want to go to the ancient sacred sect with me? Xiaochen's words echoed in the 4 women's ears. They were stunned and didn't react for a moment. After learning that Xiaochen was going to the ancient sacred sect, the 4 women had been depressed. They wanted to be by Xiaochen's side, but they knew that if they made such a request to Xiaochen, they would be too willful. After all, Xiaochen had just arrived at the ancient sacred sect and he hadn't even established himself yet. How could he bring them along? Knowing that they couldn't be willful, the 4 women had been suppressing the sadness in their hearts. Now that they heard this, could it be that the young master planned to bring them to the ancient sacred sect from the beginning? The 4 women's imaginations ran wild, and the truth was that Xiaochen did not invite Fei Mei and the others to the banquet at the Cool Breeze in today. The reason was that Xiaochen had planned to take the 4 women to the ancient sacred sect. In Xiaochen's heart, Fei Mei and the others were different from Wang Zong and the others. Wang Zong and the others were friends, while Fei Mei and the others were more like family. Unlike his feelings for Qin Shiru, Baihua Fairy, and Gu Lingyao, Xiaochen treated Fei Mei and the others as his family. They were more like his younger sisters. Therefore, from the very beginning, Xiaochen had never thought of abandoning Fei Mei and the other 3 girls. With a faint smile on his face, Xiaochen asked with a teasing smile, "What? You don't want to go to the ancient sacred sect with me?" "Yes, we want to go with young master." When they heard Xiaochen's question, the 4 girls replied in unison. However, as soon as they finished speaking, the 4 girls lowered their heads and blushed, not daring to look at Xiaochen. Seeing that the 4 girls were so shy, Xiaochen was amused. He stood up and laughed. "If you want to wait for me in Tianfengxing zone, I will tell the holy sage." After I arrange everything in the ancient holy sect, I will come to Tianfeng Zone to pick you up. With that, Xiao Chen strode out of the hall. Looking at Xiao Chen's back as he left, the four girls cautiously raised their heads after a while. There was still a hint of redness on their cheeks. Then, Green Bamboo, who had the most lively personality, was the first to dance with joy. That's great. I knew that young master would not abandon us. You still say that? I wonder who was the one who cried the most and kept saying that young master did not want you anymore. The four girls smiled at Lu Zhu's cheers. I don't want to talk to you anymore, Sister Siju. Lu Zhu blushed when she heard Siju's teasing. Xiao Chen's decision undoubtedly made the four girls very happy. However, they did not know that not only them, but also Qing Yao, Qing Luo, and Xiao Chen had the same thoughts. They liked the six maidservants very much, so Xiao Chen selfishly wanted them to stay by his side. Of course, this was not because Xiao Chen liked the six girls, but because Xiao Chen liked the feeling of being served by the six girls. Since everyone liked to be together, why should they be separated? Moreover, as the people closest to him, Xiao Chen naturally hoped that the maidservants by his side could be completely trusted. There was no need to keep switching. Qing Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and Lan, Lu Zhu, and Si Ju, these six ladies were very good. They were loyal and devoted, and they were nimble and skillful in doing things. Moreover, everyone had feelings for each other. Why not let these six ladies be in charge of serving him? This was Xiao Chen's truest thought. Of course, perhaps no one knew that many years later, the six maidservants by Xiao Chen's side would become the six sword attendants that shocked the world. They became existences that countless cultivators feared as maidservants. Without any worries, Fei Mei and the other girls were naturally no longer unhappy. The next morning, the four girls happily helped Xiao Chen wake up and wash up. Xiao Chen put on his clothes with the help of the four girls. Then, he smiled at the four girls and said, "Wait for me at Tianfeng Zone. I'll come and fetch you after you've settled down." "Yes, young master, you have to take care of yourself." Fei Mei and the other girls smiled sweetly when they heard Xiao Chen's words. After bidding farewell to the four girls, Xiao Chen was led by Yifeng all the way to the peak of the Tianfeng Sacred Mountain, which was the residence of the Tianfeng Saint. There, Xiao Chen saw the Tianfeng Saint and the Quangli Saint. Xiao Chen bowed and called out, "Disciple Xiao Chen greets the sacred masters." There's no need to be so polite. Is everything ready?" The Quangli Saint laughed heartily when he heard Xiao Chen's words. The two sacred masters did not mention yesterday's matter. Clearly, yesterday's matter was not worth mentioning in their eyes. Right now, they were most concerned about whether Xiao Chen could become the quasi-holy son of the ancient sacred sect. Everything had been taken care of and they could leave at any time. However, Xiao Chen still told the Tianfeng Saint and the Quangli Saint that he was going to bring the four girls to the ancient sacred sect. Of course, the four girls would still enter the ancient sacred sect as Xiao Chen's maids. The Tianfeng Saint and the Quangli Saint naturally did not reject this. With Xiao Chen's talent, even if he could not become the quasi-holy son, he would definitely be a direct disciple. A direct disciple bringing four maids to the ancient sacred sect was not a big deal. After all, they were not considered disciples of the ancient sacred sect. It was not a big deal at all. Afterward, under the lead of the Quangli Saint and the Tianfeng Saint, the three of them went to the ancient sacred sect through the teleportation array. He did not expect that even the Tianfeng Saint would personally make a trip to the ancient sacred sect. At the peak of the Tianfeng Sacred Mountain, there was a special teleportation array that connected to the ancient sacred sect. It was usually not opened. After a moment of dizziness, Xiao Chen regained his senses. The three of them were already outside a teleportation array of the ancient sacred sect. Looking at the unfamiliar environment, the Quangli Saint laughed heartily. His laughter was filled with pride. "How is it, kid? This is the ancient sacred sect. It is also the place where all the experts of the ancient sacred state gather. I think this should be the place that suits you." Hearing Saint Kuang-li's words, Xiaochen could not help but feel excited. He murmured softly, "A place where experts gather. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 726. This was the first time Xiaochen had come to the ancient sacred sect. His heart was filled with a myriad of emotions. It had been a long time since he first arrived at the Tiana continent. Now, Xiaochen finally arrived at the ancient sacred sect, one of the four major sects that dominated the Tiana continent. Although Tianfeng was also known as a sacred sect, Tianfeng paled in comparison to the ancient sacred sect. Strictly speaking, there was only one sacred sect in the entire ancient sacred state, and that was the ancient sacred sect. This was because the Tianfeng saint and the others were all saints that belonged to the ancient sacred sect. As the true center of the ancient sacred state, where experts from all over gathered, the ancient sacred sect controlled everything in the ancient sacred state. Walking out of the teleportation array, Xiaochen discovered that the entire ancient sacred sect was built on an endless plain. However, the buildings of the ancient sacred sect were actually floating in midair. An entire cluster of buildings that stretched for an unknown number of miles floated in midair. From afar, it looked like a fairyland. Within the sect, disciples of the ancient sacred sect could be seen flying in the air between the various buildings. Imagine a sect that was built in midair. In order to survive in the ancient sacred sect, one had to be at least in the Tao querying realm. This was because one had to be able to fly. Otherwise, one wouldn't even be able to leave the ancient sacred sect. In the ancient sacred sect, it was impossible for martial artists below the Tao querying realm to survive. Of course, as the ruler of the ancient sacred state, the ancient sacred sect wouldn't accept martial artists below the Tao querying realm. As though he was walking through a fairyland, Xiaochen arrived at the core of the ancient sacred sect under the lead of the Kuang-li saint and the Tianfeng saint. This was also where the sacred hall of the ancient sacred sect was located. As the name suggested, the sacred hall was the place where the saints of the ancient sacred sect discussed matters. Of course, most of the time, the sacred hall was just a symbol. This was because the saints rarely gathered together. Once they did, it meant that something big was about to happen. It was a magnificent sacred hall. Xiaochen thought that he had seen many magnificent palaces before, such as the main hall of Tianfeng and so on. However, after seeing the sacred hall of the ancient sacred sect with his own eyes, Xiaochen realized that the magnificent palaces that he had seen before were like thatched huts compared to the sacred hall. The two palaces weren't on the same level at all. If Xiaochen wanted to become the chosen son of the ancient sacred sect, he naturally needed to go through a series of assessments. Furthermore, the appointment of the chosen son and the chosen son required the approval of all the saints of the ancient sacred sect before it could take effect. Now, the first step was naturally to test Xiaochen's Haotian gate. Currently, there were only a total of 4 saints in the ancient sacred sect, and there were only 4 prospective saints. Of course, being a prospective saint didn't mean that they would definitely become a saint. It only meant that they had the possibility of becoming a saint. As for whether they could actually become one was still uncertain. After all, being a saint wasn't just a matter of battle prowess. It was also very strict about age. If they failed to become a saint before reaching the age of a certain age, they would be demoted to personal disciples. As a result, becoming a prospective saint didn't mean that they could become a saint. These were two different matters. Moreover, based on past experience, there might not even be a single saint out of 10 prospective saints. "Let's go in," the Tianfeng saint said softly to Xiaochen. With that, the Tianfeng saint and the Kuang-li saint entered the sacred hall first. The sacred hall was magnificent and solemn. As soon as he entered, Xiaochen saw numerous statues standing on both sides of the passageway. The passageway led to the depths of the sacred hall. There were a total of several dozen statues, representing all the saints that had appeared since the ancient sacred sect's founding. Among them, Xiaochen saw the Tianfeng saint, the Kuang-li saint, and the Qingju saint. Xiaochen even saw the statues of the 6 quasi-saints in the depths of the sacred hall. The 6 quasi-saints were the founding masters of the ancient sacred sect. They were also the ones who had founded the ancient sacred sect. He went all the way to the main hall at the core of the holy sanctum. After passing through the long corridor known as the Corridor of the Saints, Xiaochen saw a circular hall before him. The ceiling of the hall was very high, and the entire hall was built with pieces of spiritual stones. Using spiritual stones to build a building was definitely unprecedented. At the same time, because of the spiritual stones, the entire hall seemed like the starry sky, giving off an extremely profound feeling. Within the extremely spacious hall, there were 16 prayer mats arranged in a semicircle. The 16 prayer mats represented the 16 saints that the ancient sacred sect currently possessed. After bringing Xiaochen into the hall, a handsome young man's figure gradually appeared on one of the prayer mats. It was the Qingju saint. The Qingju saint smiled at the Quangli saint and the Tianfeng saint. You can begin. According to the rules, 3 saints had to be present at the same time to confirm the birth of the chosen saint. Now, there were 3 saints present at the same time, which was in accordance with the rules of the ancient sacred sect. Hearing Saint Qingju's words, Saint Quangli and Saint Tianfeng also came to their own futons and sat down cross-legged. Under the gaze of the 3 saints, Xiaochen was about to demonstrate his Tao. Kid, this is the ancient path stone tablet. Inject your spiritual energy into it and the stone tablet will manifest your Tao gate. Go on, Saint Qingju said with a smile as he threw out a huge stone tablet that was more than 10 meters tall from his storage ring. With that, Xiaochen slowly walked over to the steel. He slowly extended his right hand and gently pressed it against the steel. It was cold to the touch. Afterwards, as Xiaochen poured his spiritual energy into it, the steel began to emit a faint white light. Because of the white light, the steel seemed to become a gate of Tao. This gate of Tao was the gate of Tao within Xiaochen's body. There were 8 corners at the top. The 3 saints' expressions did not change at all when they saw the changes to the steel. After all, they already knew that Xiaochen's gate of Tao was an octagonal gate of Tao. The only reason they had to test it again was because of the rules of the ancient sacred sect. Moreover, the process of the test had to be recorded through talismans for the other saints to watch. After all, the chosen saint's appointment required the approval of all the saints. It is indeed an octagonal gate of Tao. Not bad. Since that's the case, let's arrange for this kid to take the test. The Qingju saint nodded slightly. After confirming the gate of Tao, Xiaochen was arranged to rest in a small courtyard. Because he had not completed the test, strictly speaking, Xiaochen was not a disciple of the ancient sacred sect. This was only Xiaochen's temporary residence. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 727. Because it was only a temporary residence, Xiaochen didn't have any requests. However, the Tianfeng saint actually came to visit that night, which surprised Xiaochen. The Tianfeng saint naturally had something to tell Xiaochen. The 2 of them took their seats in the room. The Tianfeng saint sat on the main seat and looked at Xiaochen with admiration in his eyes. Xiaochen, the time for your assessment has been set. It will begin tomorrow. Tomorrow would be the day of the candidate saint's assessment. Xiaochen did not mind and nodded in response. Seeing this, Tianfeng saint also smiled. You don't have to worry too much about the prospective saint's assessment. Originally, I intended to let you take the assessment after 2 years. However, Quangli said that it would be helpful for you to take the assessment first. Thinking about it, it makes sense. Therefore, you don't have to feel too pressured during this assessment. Just take it as accumulating experience and preparing for the next assessment. After all, you're still young, so there's no need to be too anxious. The Tianfeng saint and the others didn't have high hopes for Xiaochen's assessment this time. The most important reason was that Xiaochen was too young and his cultivation was too low. Under normal circumstances, the minimum cultivation needed to be at the great perfection of the Tao Gate realm to take part in the assessment. some prospective saints were even at the Tao transformation realm when they took part in the assessment. Moreover, the requirements for the prospective saint and the saint were the same. As long as they weren't over 100 years old, they could take part in the assessment. Therefore, the Tianfeng saint said that Shaoqin was too young. It was also because Shaoqin was too young and his cultivation was too low that the Tianfeng saint didn't have high hopes for Shaoqin. Of course, with Shaoqin's current age and talent, there was no problem at all for him to become the candidate's son. Even if there were no accidents, there would be no problem for him to become the son. However, what Shaoqin needed now was time to settle down. It was as if he had already determined that Shaoqin would fail this time. Even the Tianfeng saint had already arranged everything for Shaoqin. After tomorrow's assessment, Shaoqin would enter the ancient saint sect and become a pro-disciple first. 2 years later, he would take the assessment of the candidate saint. These 2 years would give Shaoqin enough time. Upon hearing the Tianfeng saint's words, Shaoqin muttered to himself, accumulating experience. The Tianfeng saint and the others didn't think highly of him, but in Shaoqin's opinion, he didn't have that much time to waste. Therefore, this time, Shaoqin wasn't planning on accumulating experience. Instead, he wanted to do his best and pass the test in one go. Of course, Shaoqin didn't say these thoughts out loud. Nodding, Shaoqin said, "I will work hard." "Okay, then rest early. I will come and pick you up tomorrow." Hearing this, the Tianfeng saint nodded and left. After the Tianfeng saint left, Shaoqin asked Shaoxin gloomily, "Old ancestor, do you think I can pass the assessment? The Tianfeng saint and the others don't think highly of me." "Kid, what's wrong? Don't you have confidence? Logically speaking, with your cultivation, it's naturally impossible for you to pass the assessment. However, you have the tempered battle body and I am here. This assessment is nothing." Hearing Shaoqin's words, Shaoxin replied with a smile. Although there was no specific cultivation level requirement for the candidate to pass the assessment, the lowest cultivation level of anyone who passed the assessment was at the great fulfillment of the Tao Gate realm. Shaoqin was only at the entry level of the Tao Gate realm, so the success rate was almost zero. However, Shaoqin had the tempered battle body and Shaoqin's existence. These 2 points could make up for Shaoqin's lack of cultivation to a certain extent. Moreover, from Shaoxing's tone, it seemed like passing the assessment wasn't difficult at all. With Shaoxing's words, Shaoqin was somewhat confident. In fact, Shaoqin wasn't unaware that it wasn't the best time for him to participate in the assessment. However, Shaoqin had his own reasons. Rather than follow the Tianfeng saint's advice and train as a direct disciple for 2 years, he might as well do his best to obtain the position of the saint. In any case, Shaoqin would need time to improve himself. How could the treatment of a direct disciple compare to that of a saint? Rather than wasting 2 years, Shaoqin might as well take one step at a time. In this way, he could enjoy the treatment of a saint for 2 more years, which would naturally be more beneficial to his cultivation. It was precisely because of this idea that Shaoqin was so desperate. Shaoqin cultivated quietly for a night in his residence. The next morning, the Tianfeng saint came to pick him up personally. At the same time, the news that someone was going to take the test of the candidate had somehow spread among the disciples of the ancient saint sect. There was no such thing as an impenetrable wall in the world, especially when it came to something as important as the assessment. Therefore, the news that someone was going to participate in the assessment had already spread, and many disciples paid close attention to it. In a quaint courtyard in the ancient sacred sect, this courtyard was definitely one of the most famous places in the ancient sacred sect. Not only was the environment beautiful, but it was also the residence of one of the 4 saints of the ancient sacred sect, Qinyu. Qinyu was sitting cross-legged beside a stream in the courtyard. There was a stream running through the courtyard, and Qinyu was holding a fishing rod and fishing idly by the stream. Just as Qinyu was yawning out of boredom, Yisu had appeared behind him out of nowhere. Her face was still expressionless as she spoke. "Saint, I heard that someone is going to challenge the assessment today." Upon hearing Yisu's words, Qinyu said lazily, "Ah, I already knew about this. That kid, Shaoqin, is really not simple. How long has it been since we last met? I didn't expect that kid to have already broken through to the Dao Gate realm. Qinyu had known about this for a long time. Not only that, but he also knew that the challenger was Xiaochen. It wasn't just Qinyu. In the other 3 residences of the saints of the ancient sacred sect, the other 3 saints were also discussing Xiaochen. Hu Fei, who had met Xiaochen once before, was currently cultivating his spear arts in the courtyard. This guy was a cultivation maniac, and he was cultivating almost all the time. After completing a set of spear arts, Hu Fei put away his spear and looked towards the location of the assessment. His eyes flickered with an inexplicable light. Xiaochen, it seems that I really underestimated you last time. Xiaochen didn't know that the entire ancient sacred sect was paying attention to him. Following the Tianfeng saint, Xiaochen arrived at the location of the assessment. It was located in an independent space deep within the ancient sacred sect's sacred palace. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 728. Behind the ancient saint sect's sacred palace, there was a small palace. From the outside, this palace did not look special at all, especially when compared to the majestic sacred palace. This small palace did not seem to have any redeeming qualities. However, all the disciples of the ancient sacred sect knew that this small palace was no less important to the ancient sacred sect than the sacred palace. This palace was called the Myriad World Palace, and it was where all the entrances to the small worlds of the ancient sacred sect were located. It was called the Myriad World Palace, and it was like a gate to the palace. There were a total of 18 tunnels, and each of them was an entrance to a small world. These 18 small worlds were all the independent small worlds that the ancient sacred sect controlled. Among them was the small world where the prospective Holy Sun test was held. At the same time, the small world where the Holy Sun test was held, as well as some other special small world entrances. He directly led Xiaochen into one of the tunnels. After walking along the tunnel for about 10 minutes, Xiaochen saw 2 white stone pillars at the end of the tunnel. These 2 white stone pillars were the entrances to the small world where the prospective Holy Sun test was held. Without wasting any time, Tianfeng Saint directly opened the entrance. A white light connected the 2 stone pillars, and a door of light formed in front of Xiaochen. The prospective Holy Sun test is actually a replica of the Holy Sun test. It's not as good as the Holy Sun test in all aspects. Of course, there won't be any danger to your life. Go ahead. If you fail, the power in this space will forcefully send you out. He had already told Xiaochen everything he needed to say last night. Moreover, the prospective Holy Sun test wouldn't be life-threatening. At most, he would be seriously injured. Therefore, Tianfeng Saint didn't say anything more. He directly let Xiaochen enter and start the test. Hearing Tianfeng Saint's words, Xiaochen nodded and did not say anything else. He then took a step forward and entered the small world. Xiaochen's figure disappeared, and the door of light slowly disappeared. The entrance closed, and Tianfeng Saint returned to the sacred palace. He didn't need to worry about what would happen next. If Xiaochen failed the test, he would naturally be sent out. When Saint Tianfeng arrived at the shrine, there was another red-haired middle-aged man in the shrine besides Saint Kuangli and Saint Qingju. Obviously, he was a holy son of the ancient saint sect. Tianfeng, how is it? Did the kid go in? The red-haired man asked Tianfeng Saint. Hearing this, Tianfeng Saint nodded and said, yes, but he should be sent out soon. After all, his cultivation is too low. The red-haired man was called Saint Huiyun. Like Saint Qingju, he was also a saint of the ancient sacred sect. He happened to be free today. When he heard that Xiaochen was going to challenge the prospective Holy Sun test, he came to the sacred palace out of curiosity. Now that Tianfeng Saint insisted that Xiaochen would fail, Saint Huiyun said unhappily, Hey, don't pour cold water on me. Besides, since you all think that this kid will fail, why did you open the fake heaven stairway world? Don't you know that the fake heaven stairway world needs a lot of energy to open each time? The small world of the Holy Sun test was called the Heaven Stairway World. The prospective Holy Sun test was created based on the Holy Sun test, so the small world was also called the fake Heaven Stairway World. Whether it was opening the Heaven Stairway World or the fake Heaven Stairway World, it naturally consumed energy. Saint Huyen said unhappily. Hearing this, Saint Kwangli laughed loudly. Ha, it's just a little bit of waste. It's nothing. This kid is worth it. This time, he's just accumulating some experience. Ha. Knowing that Xiaochen would fail, Saint Tianfeng and Saint Kwangli still opened the fake Heaven Stairway World for Xiaochen. To put it bluntly, it was because they thought highly of Xiaochen's talent and hoped to give Xiaochen more experience. Although the fake Heaven Stairway World was used for the test, there were many benefits in it. Facing Saint Kwangli's laughter, Saint Huyen curled his lips and said, opening the back door is simply wasting the sacred sect's resources. Be careful not to be taught a lesson by the Patriarch. Don't worry, the Patriarch already knows. It's fine. Besides, with Xiaochen's talent, this waste is nothing. Saint Kwangli laughed. The four saints chatted in the sacred palace, waiting for Xiaochen to fail and be sent out of the fake Heaven Stairway World. At the same time, Xiaochen, who had entered the fake Heaven Stairway World, appeared in a completely dark space. It was dark all around. Only in front of Xiaochen was a stone staircase that stretched out endlessly. This stone staircase seemed to be suspended in the dark world, and this was Xiaochen's only path. Looking at this fake Heaven Stairway, Xiaochen's eyes flashed with curiosity. This is the fake Heaven Stairway. As long as I reach the end of this fake Heaven Stairway, I'll be considered to have passed the test. Previously, he already knew the requirements of the test. As Xiaochen's voice fell, Xiaoxing's voice rang in his mind. That's right, kid. This is the fake Heaven Stairway. You'll have to do the first few steps by yourself. After that, I'll make a move at the last step. So, don't think that you'll be safe with me around. You still have to rely on yourself. Xiaoxing would only help Xiaochen pass the last step. According to Xiaoxing, Xiaochen had no way of passing the last step of the fake Heaven Stairway with his strength. However, before that, Xiaochen could only rely on himself. If he couldn't pass, then he couldn't blame anyone else. Xiaochen naturally didn't have any objections to Xiaoxing's decision. After all, he didn't want to rely too much on other people's strength. If Xiaoxing hadn't said that he had no hope of passing the last step, Xiaochen probably wouldn't have let Xiaoxing make a move. Hearing Xiaoxing's words, Xiaochen smiled slightly and said, "No problem. If I can't pass, then it's because I'm not strong enough. However, I think that there's no reason why I can't pass this fake Heaven Stairway. Even if I have to risk my life, I'll become the candidate today." With a confident smile on his face, Xiaochen immediately walked towards the fake Heaven Stairway. At the same time, in Xiaochen's body, Xiaoxing heard Xiaochen's words and felt the strong confidence and firm determination in Xiaochen's body. He couldn't help but smile. "Kid, I really don't know what sin the Sacredine sect has committed to snatch your woman. I'm really looking forward to the day when you go to the Sacredine sect. It'll be very interesting then. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 729. Without the slightest hesitation, Xiaochen stepped onto the fake sky staircase. As soon as his feet landed on the first step, a terrifying pressure suddenly descended from the sky. His feet could not help but tremble, but Xiaochen quickly stabilized his body. Gravity? It's really heavy. Xiaochen was not surprised by the appearance of this gravitational force, as Xiaoxing had already told him about it before. Strangely enough, Xiaoxing was very familiar with the ancient sacred sect's fake sky stairway and sky stairway. Xiaoxing had previously told Lin Fan that regardless of whether it was the fake sky stairway or sky stairway, once one stepped onto it, one would have to endure a huge gravitational force. Moreover, as one continued to move forward, the gravitational force would continue to increase. It was indeed not an easy task to move forward against the ever-increasing gravity. However, this was only the beginning. The current gravity was not unbearable for Xiaochen. He did not even use the tempered body of battle. He simply continued to move forward against the gravity. Along the way, the gravity continued to increase, and it was starting to become a little strenuous. In the pitch-black space, there was only an endless stone staircase and a young man who was constantly climbing along the stone staircase. The entire world seemed somewhat desolate and bleak. There was no sense of time here, so after walking for a long time, Xiaochen finally saw a circular stone platform in front of him. The stone platform separated the stairway and had a diameter of about 50 meters. Seeing the stone platform, Xiaochen smiled. Finally here? The first fake sky platform. There were 6 fake sky platforms on the fake stairway, and there were also 6 fake sky platforms on the fake sky platforms. The fake sky platforms could be regarded as 6 light cards. Once you reached the fake sky platform, you had to defeat the guardian of the fake sky platform. Only then could you continue to climb the fake sky platform. Otherwise, you would end up in failure. Did you think that the candidate's examination was only about the gravity on the fake sky platform? Obviously not. To put it bluntly, the gravity on the fake sky platform was just an appetizer. If you couldn't even bear this little bit of gravity, it could only mean that you were not qualified to participate in the candidate's examination. The real 6 obstacles on the fake sky platform were the fake sky platforms. Each fake sky platform represented a tough battle and a strong enemy. Only by defeating these strong enemies could one pass the candidate's examination. Xiaochen stepped onto the first fake sky platform. As soon as he stepped on the fake sky platform, the entire circular stone platform suddenly burst out with a dazzling golden light. The golden light formed a layer of boundary that sealed the surrounding space. At the same time, a young man in a green robe slowly condensed in front of Xiaochen. As the young man finished condensing, the expression on Xiaochen's face became somewhat unnatural. Tianfeng Saint, indeed. The young man in front of Xiaochen was Tianfeng Saint, or rather, Tianfeng Saint when he was young. The guards of the fake sky platforms on the fake sky platform were all saints of the ancient holy sect. Of course, they weren't real people, they were just condensed by the power of the talisman spell. On top of that, their strength was only the same as when they were young. For example, the Tianfeng Saint who had appeared in front of Xiaochen was only at the initial level of the Tao Gate layer. In other words, the Tianfeng Saint was at the initial level of the Tao Gate layer. The saints of the ancient holy sect were the guardians of the 6 fake Tiantai. Of course, the saints of the ancient holy sect were different, depending on luck. However, the difficulty of the Tiantai didn't change because of the saints. After all, they were all very strong. I met Tianfeng Saint on the first one. I wonder what kind of saints I'll meet on the other 5 fake sky platforms. Xiaochen did not panic at all because of the upcoming battle. On the contrary, he was looking forward to seeing which saints he would encounter in the next 5 fake roofs. Xiaochen was really interested in the fake sky platforms. Because of the 6 fake sky platforms, Xiaochen had the opportunity to compete with the saints of the ancient holy sect. At the same time, Xiaochen could feel the difference between him and the saints of the ancient holy sect when they were at the same age. According to Xiaochen, the strength of the talisman spell didn't mean that he had to defeat the saints. As long as he met the requirements, the strength of the talisman spell would disperse and the saints' images would disappear. I don't have to win. Come to think of it, our opponents are all saints of the past. Being able to defeat all of them at the same time is definitely a very difficult task. While Xiaochen was sizing up the young Tianfeng Saint before him, the Tianfeng Saint's image spoke slowly. The initial level of the Tao Gate layer? Your cultivation level is too low. Go back. You won't be able to defeat me. After that, a gap appeared behind Xiaochen. Obviously, the Tianfeng Saint was telling Xiaochen to leave. What a joke! How dare a Tao Gate cultivator challenge a fake sky platform cultivator? He was underestimating the Tianfeng Saint. Xiaochen had no intention of backing down in the face of Tianfeng Saint's actions. he said with a confident smile on his face. So what if I'm a Tao Gate cultivator? Can I defeat you? Xiaochen knew that the Tianfeng saint in front of him was not a real person, but merely a manifestation of the power of the rune. Therefore, Xiaochen did not hesitate to speak. As he spoke, Xiaosheng also exuded a strong battle intent. For some reason, Xiaochen's battle intent was stronger than usual when he faced the saints of the ancient holy sect. Perhaps it was because Xiaochen really wanted to see how big the gap was between him and the saints of the ancient holy sect at the same age. Or rather, to see who was stronger. The young Saint Tianfeng laughed when he heard Xiaochen's words and the battle intent released by Xiaochen. Ha, it seems like you're very confident. Do you think you can fight against saints of the same age? Your cultivation level is lower than mine. Do you think you have a chance of winning? How would I know if I don't fight? Xiaochen replied with a smile. Interesting. Since that's the case, I'll give you a chance. Let me see how a Tao Gate cultivator like you can defeat saints of the same age. The gap behind Xiaochen disappeared. At the same time, the young Saint Tianfeng took the initiative to attack. He threw a punch at Xiaochen. The power of the punch instantly let Xiaochen know that the Tianfeng saint in front of him was definitely not an ordinary person. To be able to become a saint, he must have been an extremely dazzling genius when he was young. Xiaochen's eyes were burning with fighting spirit. Then let me see how strong a young saint is, he said softly. Xiaochen didn't dodge. Instead, he threw a punch at the Tianfeng saint's fist. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. End of chapter. Chapter 730. Almost at the same time, Xiaochen and the Tianfeng saint's fists collided with a muffled boom. A terrifying gust of wind swept out. Feeling the power coming from the Tianfeng saint's fist, Xiaochen did not dare to hold back and went all out. This was the first time Xiaochen had truly gone all out in a battle after breaking through to the Tao Gate realm. Previously, when facing Tang Tiancheng and Yitang, Xiaochen had actually held back because their strength was not worthy of Xiaochen's full strength. Now, facing the Tianfeng saint, who was at the same level as him, Xiaochen could finally use his full strength and fight with all his might. Within the array, the two figures moved back and forth. In less than 10 breaths, the two had already exchanged more than 100 blows. They did not release any terrifying attacks and only relied on their iron fists. After the real battle, Xiaochen realized that although the Tianfeng saint looked gentle and refined, his close combat ability was not weak at all. It could even be said to be heaven-defying. No wonder he could become a saint. He was indeed not easy to deal with. After a fierce battle, Xiaochen finally hit the Tianfeng saint's face from afar. The Tianfeng saint also punched Xiaochen's abdomen. The two figures flew out at the same time and then slammed into the golden light screen formed by the array and fell to the ground. It could be said to be the same as beating a drum. Xiaochen stood up with a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. However, the battle intent on Xiaochen's body grew stronger and stronger at this time. It was very satisfying to fight with the Tianfeng saint. The battle intent in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. At the same time, the Tianfeng saint also stood up with a look of admiration in his eyes as he smiled. Not bad. You're not bad at all. You're only one level lower than me, but you can still fight with me to this extent. Next is the last move. If you can use it, you'll pass. After the fierce battle, the Tianfeng saint also praised Xiaochen. As soon as he finished speaking, the aura on the Tianfeng saint's body suddenly soared. A light blue spiritual power began to gather around Tianfeng saint. Then, Tianfeng saint slowly stretched out his right hand. Above his right hand, a seemingly slow palm strike shot out. Soon, a fierce gust of wind rushed toward Xiaochen. This was the Tianfeng saint's last move. Of course, the power of this move was not to be underestimated. It was the famous martial skill of the Tianfeng saint when he was young, the green wind palm. The terrifying hurricane swept through the entire space, but it only took a moment for Xiaochen to be swallowed up by the hurricane. Being in the middle of the hurricane, the surrounding winds were like blades, as if they were about to tear Xiaochen into pieces. Tempered battle body. In the face of the Tianfeng Saint's last move, Xiaochen displayed the tempered battle body. The green wind palm was unavoidable. He could only take it head-on. Fortunately, Xiaochen had the tempered battle body, so he was not too afraid. A golden light bloomed, blocking the fierce hurricane. After about 100 breaths, the hurricane slowly dissipated, and Xiaochen appeared in front of the Tianfeng Saint, unharmed. Seeing that his green wind palm did not hurt Xiaochen at all, the young Tianfeng Saint was stunned at first, but soon he laughed softly. Is this what it means to be better than the master? Not bad. You're much stronger than I was when I was young. You've passed. As he spoke, the image of the Tianfeng Saint slowly dissipated, and the surrounding array also stopped operating at this moment. Xiaochen had successfully passed the first fake sky platform. It was definitely a lucky thing for Xiaochen to be able to fight against Saint Tianfeng, who was at the same age as him. Moreover, judging from the result of the battle, Xiaochen's strength was slightly stronger than Saint Tianfeng's when he was younger. After all, Xiaochen could be said to have fought against someone who was at a higher level than him. It should be known that Xiaochen's current cultivation was only at the beginning of the Haotian realm. It was not easy to fight with a saint at the same age as him, and it was naturally more difficult to fight with someone who was at a higher level than him. Xiaochen let out a breath and was about to continue climbing the fake sky platform, but Xiaosheng, who was one step ahead of him, reminded him, "Boy, do you want to die? Don't you want to rest after such a big battle? Do you think you can pass the second fake sky platform in your current state?" Xiaochen wanted to continue climbing the fake sky platform, but after being scolded by Xiaosheng, Xiaochen came back to his senses. He immediately sat cross-legged on the ground and began to recover his spiritual power. Don't laugh at the fake sky platform. You must be in your peak state at all times. Otherwise, you won't be able to pass the fake sky platform. During the fake sky platform assessment, there was plenty of time, so Xiaochen had plenty of time to adjust his state. According to Xiaosheng, Xiaochen used a full hour to adjust his state before continuing to climb the fake sky platform. He had successfully passed the first fake sky platform, and there were 5 left. Xiaosheng would help him pass the last fake sky platform, but Xiaochen had to rely on his own strength to pass the last fake sky platform. If Xiaochen couldn't reach the last fake sky platform, he could only end up failing. Just as Xiaochen continued to rush to the second fake sky platform, Saint Tianfeng and the other 3 people who had been waiting in the Holy Palace all had doubts on their faces. Xiaochen has been in the fake sky platform world for almost half a day, right? Logically speaking, he should have passed the first fake sky platform, but why hasn't he come out yet? Saint Quanli was the first to speak. Saint Qingju, who was beside Saint Quanli, smiled and said, "Did this boy pass the first fake sky platform? That's impossible. Although Xiaochen's talent is top-notch, he's too young. His cultivation level is too low. How could he pass the first fake sky platform?" Saint Tianfeng was also puzzled when he heard Saint Qingju's words. "Don't worry, let's wait and see. Anyway, this boy will come out soon. Even if he passes the first fake sky platform, he definitely won't be able to pass the second one," Saint Huiyun said with a smile. Originally, Saint Tianfeng and the others thought that Xiaochen wouldn't be able to pass the first fake sky platform, but now it seemed that there were some changes in the situation. Of course, Saint Huiyun was right. Even if Xiaochen passed the first fake sky platform, he definitely wouldn't be able to pass the second one. However, if Xiaochen really passed the first fake sky platform, wouldn't it prove that Xiaochen's true strength was above their expectations? They had underestimated Xiaochen. As time passed, the 4 saints began to become curious. They originally thought that Xiaochen would fail soon, but now, their mood had changed a little. They wanted to see if Xiaochen would give them a surprise in the end. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 731. The Tianfeng Saint and the others were secretly looking forward to the surprise Xiaochen would bring them. Xiaochen naturally didn't know about this. At this time, Xiaochen was thinking about the second fake Tiantai. Compared to the first fake Tiantai, the pressure of the second fake Tiantai was even greater. With every step, Xiaochen felt as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. He kept silent and kept his head down. After a long time, Xiaochen finally arrived at the second fake Tiantai. It was the same design. When Xiaochen stepped on the second fake Tiantai, the array was activated and the surrounding space was sealed. At the same time, the image of a young saint appeared. Xiaochen didn't know this saint, but he had seen a statue of this saint in the Saint Gallery of the Saint Palace. It seemed to be a saint from a long time ago. He should have died long ago. It was a saint who had already passed away, and Xiaochen was able to meet this saint thanks to the power of the fake celestial stairway. The two looked at each other. The saint looked at Xiaochen and said calmly, "You're at the initial stage of the Tao Gate realm. You can pass the first fake Tiantai. Your strength is not bad. Let's fight. If you defeat me, you can continue to move forward. Otherwise, go back to where you came from." The saint's personality was obviously very cold. He didn't say a word of nonsense and directly asked for a fight. At the same time, without waiting for Xiaochen to reply, the saint took the initiative to attack. A large saber appeared in his hand, and he went all out. Seeing this, Xiaochen naturally didn't dare to be careless. The storage ring in his hand flashed, and the ink dragon sword instantly appeared in his hand. The saber and the sword collided, and the two immediately engaged in a fierce battle. The saint's saber technique was composed of domineering power. There was no technique involved. Every move could be said to be very simple. However, such a simple saber technique greatly increased the pressure on Xiaochen. There was nothing fancy about it. It was the most direct way to defeat 10 people with strength. While fighting fiercely, Xiaochen secretly complained, "What a fierce saber technique." In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged hundreds of blows. Gradually, Xiaochen became familiar with the saint's saber techniques. With a soft cry, he unleashed the square heaven sword shadow. Choosing not to meet force with force, Xiaochen's sword moved nimbly, dodging this saint's attacks while using the square heaven sword shadow to attack this saint. Not bad. You know how to play to your strengths and avoid your weaknesses. Now, can you take this strike of mine? The saint praised Xiaochen expressionlessly. However, as soon as he finished speaking, the large blade in his hand blossomed with a fiery red spiritual light. Saber slash. He shouted in a deep voice and slashed out with his blade. This blade seemed to be burning with flames descending from the sky and directly locking onto Xiaochen. The infinitely magnified blade light directly sealed off all of Xiaochen's escape routes. In the face of this saint's powerful attack, Xiaochen knew that he could no longer avoid it. He could only meet force with force. He tightly gripped the ink dragon sword in his hands and fiercely slashed out. The square heaven sword shadow condensed into a sword edge and fiercely collided with the saint's blade light. When the two collided, a terrifying aftershock spread out in all directions. Xiaochen's figure was directly sent flying by the aftershock. He spat out a large mouthful of blood as his body slammed into the array's golden light screen. After a full 10 breaths, the aftershock slowly dissipated. Xiaochen and the saint stood facing each other and did not attack again. The saint looked at Xiaochen and said indifferently, "Not bad." Then, he slowly dissipated. In the final head-on collision, Xiaochen was actually at a disadvantage. However, the saint's image still acknowledged Xiaochen. Therefore, Xiaochen had successfully passed the second fake rooftop. Seeing the saint's image slowly disappear, Xiaochen sighed helplessly. Xiaochen spoke at the right time. "How is it, kid? Have you realized your shortcomings?" "Yes." Hearing Xiaoxin's words, Xiaochen nodded. Then, he sat down and began to adjust his breathing. After the battle with the saint, Xiaochen had indeed realized that he was not strong enough. In fact, on the surface, Xiao Chen's current attack methods were not few. However, there was a big problem. Xiao Chen did not have any sword moves that he could use to meet force with force. For example, the Square Heaven Sword Shadow, Tiger Gallop, Ganjiang Finger Sword, and so on. Although these moves were not weak, they were not suitable for a head-on collision. The Square Heaven Sword Shadow was a sword move that killed a group of people. It was not very lethal to a single target. Tiger Gallop was needless to say, it was a movement technique. As for Ganjiang Finger Sword, although it was a move that killed a single target, it was only suitable for a killing blow. It was not suitable for a head-on collision. In other words, if Xiao Chen was forced to a dead end and the two sides were about to fight head-on, Xiao Chen did not have any sword moves that he could use. Moves that used brute force against brute force were definitely known for their ferocity. Brute force could take down 10, just like the Saint's final strike from before. After realizing his weakness, Xiao Chen also knew that he really had to find a fierce sword technique in the future to make up for this shortcoming. After teasing the second fake Tiantai for more than 2 hours, Xiao Chen recovered. Then he stepped on the fake heavenly stairs again and moved on to the third fake Tiantai. The pressure increased again. On the way to the third fake Tiantai, another saint's image appeared. This battle was obviously more difficult than the previous one. After suffering serious injuries, Xiao Chen finally succeeded. He had already passed 3 fake Tiantai. However, he still had to rely on his own strength to pass the next 2 fake Tiantai. As he went on, the saint's images that appeared on the fake Tiantai were stronger and more difficult. However, it was undeniable that after fighting with these saints, Xiao Chen was also constantly improving. At the same time, some of his shortcomings were gradually highlighted. As the battle continued, Xiao Chen became more and more aware of his shortcomings and advantages. At the same time, he also learned how powerful these saints were when they were young. It took Xiao Chen 4 hours to recover on the third fake Tiantai. After that, it took him 6 hours to pass the fourth fake Tiantai. There were only 2 fake Tiantai left. Xiao Chen only needed to pass the 5th fake Tiantai with his own strength. As for the 6th fake Tiantai, he could only rely on Xiao Chen's strength. Is this the last fake Tiantai? After standing up on the 4th fake Tiantai, Xiao Chen looked at the endless stairway and murmured softly. As Xiao Chen murmured, Xiao Shen chuckled. Boy, the 5th fake Tiantai is the real test for you. If you can't break through the limit of this fake Tiantai, I'm afraid you won't be able to pass it. Come on, pass the last fake Tiantai, and your mission will be completed. Please add me to your collection, monthly vote, recommend me. Chapter 732. Xiao Shen's words gave Xiao Chen a bad feeling. At the same time, he could vaguely guess what was going on. Xiao Chen had passed 4 fake roofs in a row. He could feel that the difficulty of the fake roofs was getting higher and higher. When Xiao Chen reached the 4th fake roofs, the saint's shadow was already at the small perfection stage of the Dao Gate realm. In order to pass the 4th fake Tiantai, Xiao Chen had tried his best, but in the end, he still couldn't defeat the saint. It was only because the saint approved of him that he passed. In order to pass the 4th fake roofs, Xiao Chen had used all his means. How was Xiao Chen going to pass the 5th fake roofs? Perhaps it was just like what Xiao Shen said. Only by breaking through the limit could one pass the 5th stage. Otherwise, there should be no hope. Looking at the stairway in front of him silently, Xiao Shen saw that Xiao Chen didn't reply. He chuckled and said, Why? Don't you have confidence? Actually, it's okay if you want to give up. It's not easy for you to reach this stage at your age. Ancestor, you must be joking. We've already come this far. How can I give up? Anyway, I'm only 1 step away from my mission. As long as I pass the 5th stage, the rest is up to you, Ancestor. Xiao Chen chuckled when he heard Xiao Shen's words. No matter what the 5th stage was, Xiao Chen had no reason to back down. Xiao Chen stepped on the stairway. However, as soon as he stepped on the stairway, Xiaochen almost fell to his knees. This pressure was simply, Xiaochen gritted his teeth and slowly stabilized his body. After adapting to the terrifying pressure for a while, he began to continue climbing. The pressure on the way to the fifth fake rooftop was indeed terrifying. When Xiaochen finally arrived at the fifth fake rooftop, he was already sweating profusely. It was as if he had just taken a shower. His clothes were so wet that water could be run out. Xiaochen was extremely tired, but he obviously didn't have time to rest. When Xiaochen stepped on the fifth fake roofs, the formation was activated. Then, the space was sealed, and the image of a saint appeared in front of Xiaochen. Looking at the saint before him, he had the appearance of a young man with a simple longsword on his back. His appearance was ordinary, but his eyes were extremely sharp and gave off an indescribable feeling of oppression. Xiaochen didn't pay much attention to the saint's appearance. He just glanced at him. What made Xiaochen feel helpless was the cultivation realm of the saint. After sensing it secretly, Xiaochen smiled bitterly and said, as expected, the perfect stage of the Tao Gate realm. The saint's cultivation realm was set at the perfect stage of the Tao Gate realm, which made Xiaochen feel a little speechless. Originally, it was not a big deal for Xiaochen to challenge someone at a higher level, but it also depended on the opponent. Xiaochen's opponents were all saints when they were young. How could ordinary warriors compare with them? Xiaochen could fight someone at a higher level, and these saints could also fight someone at a higher level when they were young. Moreover, Xiaochen's cultivation was only at the entry stage of the Tao Gate realm, but the saint's cultivation was at the perfect stage of the Tao Gate realm. There was a gap of 4 small levels between them. How could he fight? No wonder Xiaochen said that he could only pass this stage if he broke through his limit. It seemed that it was true. As if he sensed the bitterness in Xiaochen's heart, Xiaochen smiled gloatingly and said, "How about it, boy? Do you want to give up? If you can't break through your limit, you won't be able to pass this fifth fake sky platform." There was no danger to his life in this fake sky platform world, so Xiaochen was not worried at all. Hearing this, Xiaochen shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Forget about giving up. I've already come this far. No matter what, I have to fight first." As he spoke, Xiaochen had already unsheathed the ink dragon sword in his hand. Seeing this, the saint standing opposite Xiaochen also said indifferently, "It's really surprising that someone at the entry stage of the Tao Gate realm can make it here. It seems that you won't listen to me when I tell you to give up, right?" "Yes, it wasn't easy for me to get here. Even if I fail, I have to give it a try," Xiaochen replied. Hearing this, the saint pondered for a moment, then slowly pulled out the long sword on his back and said softly, "Give it a try? Then come on, Junior. Let me see how good your sword Dao is." He gestured for Xiaochen to make the first move. Hearing this, Xiaochen naturally wouldn't be polite. He immediately slashed out with his sword, and the blade slashed out rapidly towards the saint. However, in the face of Xiaochen's sword, the saint simply raised his Jian-Yi and neutralized Xiaochen's attack. Xiaochen was not surprised that the saint was able to easily nullify his attack. He did not stop at all. He performed the stampede of the tiger and the tempered battle form. Under the illumination of the golden light, Xiaochen leaped up and immediately engaged the saint in battle. Both of them were sword cultivators. Their 2 long swords constantly emitted the sound of metal colliding, and their figures crisscrossed in the array. As they clashed, Xiaochen was quickly suppressed. However, with the tempered battle body and his comprehension of the sword Dao, Xiaochen bitterly held on. As if he didn't want to end the battle too quickly, the saint suppressed Xiaochen, but he didn't give Xiaochen the final blow. The saint said indifferently as they fought, "Not bad. Your way of the sword is actually no weaker than mine at the same time. It's just a pity that your cultivation isn't enough. Just this aspect alone is enough for me to firmly suppress you. You should know that in a battle between experts, the slightest weakness will be magnified infinitely. As a result, you have no chance of winning against me with your insufficient cultivation," said the saint. The saint said indifferently. The fact was indeed so. the huge gap in cultivation made Xiaochen unable to turn the tables. However, what surprised Xiaochen was that the saint didn't seem to want to defeat him. In fact, he could have defeated him with a single strike during the battle, but he didn't do so. Although it was a battle, Xiaochen felt that the saint was forcing him, teaching him, and constantly pushing him to his limits. It was under this feeling that the battle between Xiaochen and the saint was infinitely prolonged. He didn't know how much time had passed, and he didn't know how long the battle had been going on for. Just when Xiaochen was extremely exhausted and his body was about to fall apart, a muffled sound came from his body. The barrier of the initial success of the Tao Gate realm was directly broken. He had broken through. Even Xiaochen himself didn't expect that he would break through to the initial success of the Tao Gate realm at this time. Suddenly, Xiaochen thought of Xiaosheng's words. Breaking through the limit. Was this breaking through the limit? Breaking through in battle. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 733. Xiaochen had a breakthrough in his cultivation during the battle. Along with the breakthrough in his cultivation, his aura also soared all the way. Soon, he reached the small success stage of the Tao Gate realm, but it was accompanied by an incomparable sense of hunger. This sense of hunger was not because he wanted to eat, but because he longed for spiritual power. After all, after fighting for so long, Xiaochen's spiritual power had long been depleted. Now that he had a breakthrough in his cultivation, his thirst for spiritual power was even more difficult to suppress. Under the urging of such intense hunger, Xiaochen did not care about anything else. He directly sat down cross-legged, took out a pill to replenish his spiritual power, and swallowed it in one gulp. As the pill entered his body, pure spiritual power melted in Xiaochen's body. It was like rain after a long drought. An indescribable feeling of comfort quickly spread in Xiaochen's heart. Seeing that Xiaochen had taken a seat, the fifth pseudo-heavenly platform's saint image did not attack again. In fact, many people did not understand what the criteria for the quasi-saint and saint assessment were. Was it to defeat the images of these saints? It could be said that it was, but it was not correct. The images of the saints condensed by the formation actually had some of their own thoughts under the influence of the formation and the power of law of the pseudo-heaven stairway world. Therefore, whether one could pass or not did not necessarily mean that one had to defeat them. One only needed to obtain their approval. Just like now, the saint did not attack again. Instead, he quietly waited for Xiaochen to stabilize his cultivation. After 3 hours, Xiaochen slowly opened his eyes. When he saw the saint standing in front of him with his hands behind his back, Xiaochen stood up and bowed to thank him. "Thank you, Senior." He knew very well that his breakthrough this time was entirely due to the help of this saint. From the beginning until now, this saint had been constantly pushing his limits. It was under extreme pressure that Xiaochen could break through. In the face of Xiaochen's gratitude, the saint said indifferently, "You don't have to thank me. This is your own talent. If you had not broken through, I would have had to defeat you with my sword." The saint's assessment for Xiaochen was to force Xiaochen to break through. If Xiaochen had not broken through under such circumstances, then Xiaochen would definitely not have been able to pass the fifth pseudo-heavenly platform. Now that Xiaochen had succeeded in breaking through, he had received the saint's approval. As his voice fell, the saint paused as if he was thinking about something, then he continued, "However, even if I let you pass the fifth pseudo-heavenly platform, you will not be able to pass the sixth pseudo-heavenly platform. If you want our approval, at least, you have to have your own ability. If you are defeated in one with my sword." The saint was very direct. Even if Xiaochen broke through the fifth pseudo-heavenly platform, Xiaochen would definitely not be able to pass the sixth pseudo-heavenly platform. Xiaochen did not quibble. However, the sixth pseudo-heavenly platform was no longer his problem. Whether he could pass it or not depended on Xiaosheng. Therefore, Xiaochen did not mind at all. "Thank you, but I'm still saying the same thing. Since we're already here, how can I back down?" "That's true. In that case, you can go and experience it." After hearing Xiao Chen's words, the saint thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. After that, the saint's image slowly dissipated and the formation around them stopped operating. Xiao Chen had finally passed the fifth pseudo-heavenly platform. The continuous fierce battles had made Xiao Chen tense up. At this moment, he could finally relax and a smile appeared on his face. "Ancestor, it's up to you now." "Of course. Since you've already come this far, how can I not help you become the prospective Holy Son?" Xiao Sheng replied with a smile when he heard Xiao Chen's words. Passing the first 5 pseudo-heavenly platforms was already Xiao Chen's limit. After that, Xiao Sheng took control of Xiao Chen's body. This time, Xiao Chen handed over control of his body to Xiao Sheng. Moreover, because of the heavenly spiritual pool, Xiao Sheng did not consume too much energy to control Xiao Chen's body this time. At least, it would not hurt his foundation. After Xiao Sheng successfully took control of his body, Xiao Chen's qi began to rise. Soon, he rose from the initial Taoist realm to the initial Taoist realm. Then, Xiao Sheng took a step forward and instantly stepped on the stairway to the 6th pseudo-heavenly platform. He walked towards the last pseudo-heavenly platform with light steps. With Xiao Sheng's help, Xiao Chen was naturally very relaxed. He watched the development of the situation like a bystander. It could be said that he ran all the way. Not long after, Xiao Sheng arrived at the 6th pseudo-heavenly platform. This was the end of the pseudo-heavenly platform. There was only a circular platform floating in the darkness. With Xiao Sheng's arrival, the array of the 6 pseudo-heavenly platforms was activated. Then, a saint appeared. This was the final test of the pseudo-heavenly stairway world. The cultivation of this saint was set at the initial Taoist realm. No wonder Xiao Sheng said that Xiao Chen could not pass the 6th pseudo-heavenly platform. It was indeed so. With such a huge gap in cultivation, this was no longer something that could be changed by hard work or breakthroughs. Their eyes met, and the saint spoke first. "No one has been here for a long time. Come, let me see if you are qualified to pass this pseudo-heavenly stairway." Xiao Sheng smiled when he heard the saint's words. He didn't say anything else as he took a step forward and immediately engaged in battle with the saint. He was reduced to a mere spectator. This time, the strength that Xiao Sheng displayed truly shocked Xiao Chen. Although Xiao Sheng's cultivation was only at the beginning of the Tao transformation realm, he was able to defeat a saint of the same cultivation level as him without much effort. No wonder he was known as the strongest saint in the Tiana continent. After easily defeating the saint of the 6th pseudo-heavenly platform, Xiao Sheng returned control of the body to Xiao Chen. At this point, Xiao Chen finally passed the pseudo-heavenly stairway and the assessment of the prospective Holy Son. "Kid, the test this time is too much of an exaggeration. With your strength, I'm afraid there's still a big gap between you and the other prospective Holy Sons of the ancient Holy Sect. So, you can't relax in the future. The prospective Holy Sons have a lot of cultivation resources, so you have to work harder." Xiao Sheng reminded with a smile. "Ancestor, don't worry. I know this better than anyone else," Xiao Chen replied. At the same time that Xiao Chen passed the pseudo-heavenly stairway, in the outside world, in the sky of the ancient sacred sect, a ray of light descended from the sky. With the appearance of this ray of light, the entire ancient sacred sect was shaken. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the sky, and their faces were filled with shock. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 734. This was the tradition of the ancient sacred sect. Whenever a new direct disciple, prospective Holy Son, or saint appeared, the sky above the ancient sacred sect would be filled with multicolored light. It was like a heavenly river that spread to every corner of the ancient sacred sect. Countless disciples stared at the sky, and someone couldn't help but whisper, 3 colored rays of light represent the appearance of a new direct disciple, 5 colored rays of light represent the prospective Holy Child, 7 colored rays of light represent the Holy Child, and 9 colored rays of light represent the Holy Child. This is 5 colored rays of light. Could it be that a prospective Holy Child has appeared? A new Holy Son? Could it be Xiao Chen? He's the only one who went to the fake heavenly stairs, right? Many disciples whispered. Not only them, but even the Tianfeng Saint and the other 3 shrines were stunned. It took them a while to come back to their senses. Saint Kuangli said in disbelief. This is a 5-colored rainbow. Did Xiao Chen pass the fake heavenly stairs? The 4 of them were the ones who knew the most about this matter. They also knew that Xiao Chen was the only one who was challenging the fake heavenly stairway. Now that the 5-colored light had appeared, there was only one explanation. That was, Xiao Chen had successfully passed the fake heavenly stairway and was now one of the prospective holy sons of the ancient sacred sect. The 4 saints didn't think highly of Xiao Chen. After all, Xiao Chen's cultivation was too low. At first, the 4 saints thought that Xiao Chen couldn't even pass the first fake heavenly stairs. Later, they thought that Xiao Chen would give them a surprise. But now, this surprise was too big. Passing the fake heavenly stairs? What kind of change was this? Xiao Chen's cultivation was only at the initial Dao Gate realm. How did he pass the fake heavenly stairs? How is he going to get past the 6th fake Tian Tai? Hearing Saint Kuangli's words, the Tianfeng Saint and the other 2 saints were silent. Their eyes were filled with shock. After a while, Saint Qingju recovered and said indifferently. This kid is really troublesome. Now it seems that he passed the fake heavenly stairs. Let's go and pick him up. We'll ask him then. Hearing Saint Qingju's words, Saint Tianfeng and Saint Huiyan both nodded. Then, the 4 saints disappeared from the sacred palace and appeared at the entrance of the Myriad World Palace. Not long after the 4 saints appeared, the door of the Myriad World Palace opened, and Xiao Chen walked out slowly. Seeing Xiao Chen's appearance, Saint Kuangli, who was the most impatient, couldn't help but ask. Stepping in front of Xiao Chen, Saint Kuangli squeezed Xiao Chen's shoulders with both hands and asked in surprise, "Boy, did you really pass the fake celestial stairway?" It was too shocking. Facing such an excited Saint Kuangli, Xiao Chen didn't even have time to reply. Perhaps because he was too excited, Saint Kuangli didn't pay attention to the strength of his hands. He directly squeezed Xiao Chen's shoulders until they hurt. Enduring the pain, Xiao Chen said speechlessly, Lord Saint, can you let me go first? If this goes on, I'll be killed by you." How could Xiao Chen withstand the power of a saint? Saint Kuangli came back to his senses and hurriedly let go of Xiao Chen. However, his eyes were still fixed on Xiao Chen, waiting for his reply. Not only Saint Kuangli, but Saint Tianfeng, Saint Qingju, and Saint Huiyan were also the same. Facing the gazes of the 4 saints, Xiao Chen knew why they were so shocked. After all, it was indeed unreasonable for him to pass the quasi-heaven stairway with his cultivation. But now, there was no other choice. Xiao Chen could only brace himself and do it. "Ah, Lord Saint, it is indeed me who passed the quasi-heaven stairway." "Yes, we know it's you. But your cultivation is only at the Dao Gate realm. How is it possible?" "No, wait, you broke through?" Tianfeng Saint said after hearing Xiao Chen's words. However, he suddenly realized that Xiao Chen's cultivation level was no longer at the initial level of the Dao Gate realm. Instead, it was at the initial level of the Dao Gate realm. This kid had actually made a breakthrough on the quasi-sky stairway. The shock in his eyes became even more intense. This brat actually had a breakthrough in his cultivation. Xiao Chen shocked the 4 saints again and again. Finally, under the lead of the 4 saints, Xiao Chen once again arrived at the sacred hall and briefly explained the process of him passing the quasi-heaven stairway to the 4 saints. Of course, Xiao Chen didn't say a word about Xiaosheng. Although Saint Tianfeng knew about Xiaosheng's existence, he obviously didn't think too much about it. After a simple explanation, although the 4 saints were still filled with surprise, the result was already as such. Xiao Chen had passed the quasi-heaven stairway. This was an undeniable fact. And according to the rules of the ancient saint sect, Xiao Chen's age, Dao Gate, and other aspects also met the requirements to become a candidate. Therefore, Xiao Chen was already a sure thing. After calming himself down, Saint Qingju finally looked at Xiao Chen and said, since you have passed the quasi-heaven stairway, no matter what method you used, it is your ability. From this, it can be seen that you are indeed capable. In this case, there will naturally be a place for you as the candidate of the Ancient Saint sect. How about this? 3 days later, we will hold the conferring ceremony for you. You can rest for the next few days. He no longer cared about how Xiaochen had passed the quasi-heaven stairway. In any case, Xiaochen had passed it. Hearing Saint Qingjue's words, Xiaochen nodded and agreed. Subsequently, Saint Tianfeng personally sent Xiaochen back to his residence. As for Xiaochen's future residence, it would be decided after the conferring ceremony. Of course, Xiaochen did not care too much about these trivial matters. After settling Xiaochen, Saint Tianfeng returned to the Saint Palace. At this time, there were not only the voices of Saint Tianfeng and the other 3 saints in the Saint Palace. On the 16 praying mats, there were figures sitting cross-legged. Of course, other than Saint Tianfeng and the other 3 saints, the figures of the other saints were somewhat illusory. Clearly, they did not come in person, but were merely shadows. All the saints gathered in the hall once again. One of the saints said, "Who would have thought that our Ancient Saint sect would have another quasi-saint? Since that's the case, let's follow the procedure. Qingju, this time the 4 of you are in charge." All the saints had gathered for Xiaochen's matter. After all, the conferring of a quasi-saint required the agreement of all the saints. Saint Qingju nodded slightly when he heard this saint's words. He then took out the video of Xiaochen testing the gate of Tao for all the saints to see and briefly introduced Xiaochen. After watching the video and listening to Saint Qingjue's explanation, all the saints nodded slightly. There was no problem with the entire process. As such, Xiaochen's position as the quasi-saint was naturally not to be doubted. Very quickly, the 16 saints of the Ancient Saint sect unanimously agreed that Xiaochen would be the 5th quasi-saint. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 735. The 16 saints unanimously agreed that Xiaochen would become the 5th quasi-holy son of the Ancient Saint sect. After voting, all the saints looked at the phantom in the middle. Unlike the other saints, this phantom was shrouded in a white light, and his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. However, it wasn't difficult to see from the expressions of the saints that they all respected this person very much. And this was also reasonable, because this saint whose appearance couldn't be seen clearly was the ancestor of the Ancient Saint sect. He was an old monster who had lived for countless years and was known as one of the oldest saints in the Tiana continent. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that at least half of the remaining 15 saints present were this old man's disciples. Saints could live for a very long time, and the gap in strength between saints was obviously very large. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that old monsters like the ancestor of the Ancient Saint sect had already reached the end of the saint realm. As long as they had the source energy, these old monsters could break through to the quasi-saint realm in an instant. Of course, there was no source energy in the Tiana continent, so even these old monsters had no way to break through to the quasi-saint realm. His name was Randang Kozai. Facing the gazes of all the saints, a majestic voice came out from Randang Kozai's mouth. In 3 days, Xiaochen's conferring ceremony will be held. Qingju, Tianfeng, Huiyun, and Quangli, the 4 of you will be in charge. We will follow Master's orders. Hearing Randang Kozai's words, Saint Qingju and the other 3 respectfully replied. After saying that, Randang Kozai's phantom took the lead and disappeared into the shrines. Then, the saints chatted for a while and left one after another. Soon, only Saint Qingju and the other 3 were left in the shrines. The matter was finally settled. On the same day, Saint Qingju announced that Xiaochen would be the 5th quasi-holy son of the Ancient Saint sect. As soon as this news came out, it naturally caused an uproar in the Ancient Saint sect. Countless holy sons and deacons of the Ancient Saint sect were discussing Xiaochen. In less than half a day, Xiaochen's past deeds were dug out by everyone, including Xiaochen's past in the Moonless Empire. One must not underestimate these disciples of the Ancient Saint sect. To be able to enter the ancient saint sect, none of them were ordinary characters. There were no more than 10,000 disciples in the entire ancient saint sect. Compared to Tianfeng and other outer sects, the number of disciples in the ancient saint sect was very small. This was also the philosophy of the ancient saint sect all this while. Taking the business route, they would invest their limited resources on a small number of people and nurture a single powerful being. In the eyes of the ancient saint sect, it was definitely more cost-effective than nurturing 10 or even 100 mediocre people. Therefore, the ancient saint sect had always been strict in recruiting disciples. As a result, there were only 10,000 disciples in the ancient saint sect. Many disciples were discussing Shaoqin curiously. Being the fifth candidate of the chosen saint was definitely a meteoric rise. Some people were envious, while others were jealous. After all, Shaoqin had just entered the ancient saint sect. However, he had directly become the chosen saint. This made many of the older disciples feel that it was unfair. In addition, someone had spread the news that Shaoqin was only in the Dao Gate realm. It was simply a joke that a Dao Gate realm martial artist could become the fifth candidate of the ancient saint sect. It was precisely because of this imbalance that some disciples began to question the decision of the sect. Of course, they did not dare to go against the decision of the saints. As such, they could only vent their jealousy and anger on Shaoqin. Some people were envious, some people worshipped, and some people were jealous. For a time, there were all kinds of rumors about Shaoqin in the ancient saint sect. Some people said that Shaoqin was indeed a genius. Some people said that Shaoqin was just lucky. There were even people who said that Shaoqin had cheated in passing the quasi-heavenly stairway. The saints should revoke Shaoqin's position as the fifth candidate of the chosen saint. There were many different opinions. However, no matter how these disciples discussed, Shaoqin's position as the fifth candidate of the chosen saint was not affected at all. 3 days passed in a flash. On this day, Shaoqin began his own chosen saint's coronation hall in the ancient saint sect's sacred palace. Countless disciples gathered outside the sacred palace. They were not qualified to enter the sacred palace. They waited anxiously. Not long after, Shaoqin appeared in front of everyone under the lead of a half-saint deacon. Shaoqin's appearance naturally attracted the attention of all the disciples. Everyone began to discuss softly. Although their voices were soft, Shaoqin still heard them. Among them, many people were hostile to him because of jealousy. Shaoqin did not comment on this, nor did he have the intention to pay attention to them. These guys did not have the ability to become the chosen saint, so they thought that others could not. Therefore, these people began to slander him without any bottom line. They said that he had cheated, that he was lucky, that he had used some unspeakable means. All kinds of rumors spread from the disciples' mouths. Shaoqin guessed that there might be many people who would find trouble with him in the future. However, he did not care. Shaoqin only wanted strength. As for other things, he did not care. Under the lead of the half-saint deacon, Shaoqin came all the way to the sacred palace. Today, the sacred palace was very lively. The 16 saints of the ancient saint sect had gathered. Of course, except for Saint Qingju and the other 3, the other saints were just shadows. Apart from the saints, the other 4 saints of the ancient saint sect, as well as the 4 chosen saints, as long as they were in the ancient saint sect, were all present. Qinyu and Hufei were the sons, and there were also 2 prospective sons present. Shaoqin nodded slightly at Qinyu. He came to the center of the sacred hall and bowed to all the saints. Saint Qingjue then said plainly, "Disciple Shaoqin has condensed the 8-edged Dao Gate and successfully passed the quasi-sky stairway. As a result, Shaoqin is specially conferred the position of chosen saint of the ancient saint sect. From today onwards, Shaoqin is the 5th chosen saint of the ancient saint sect. He will be given a heavenly ancient robe and a chosen saint cave dwelling. He will choose a day to choose the 4 saint palaces." Saint Qingju said slowly. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 half-saint deacons arrived before Shaoqin with a heavenly ancient robe and a chosen saint medallion. The heavenly ancient robe was a quasi-saint defensive soul treasure. It was very powerful, and cultivators below the Tao King realm would not be able to harm Xiao Chen at all once he wore it. Of course, this was because Xiao Chen's cultivation was not enough. If Xiao Chen's cultivation could break through again, the heavenly ancient robe would allow Xiao Chen to block all attacks below the half-saint realm. Every single heavenly ancient robe was a peerless treasure. The ancient saint sect had spent a great deal of effort to forge it. Since ancient times, only chosen saints could wear it. Of course, compared to the chosen saint's primordial robe, the heavenly ancient robe was naturally slightly inferior. However, to Xiao Chen, a quasi-saint defensive soul treasure was already a very heaven-defying treasure. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.